like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you. Hello Internet. We've got a fascinating man here in front of us. He started in the South African Navy, I believe around about 1973. And then he joined probably the finest army in the world, the Rhodesian Army. RLI, Rhodesian Light Infantry, became an officer. And then after the changes which came to Rhodesia, and he became Zimbabwe, he came down south, and he ended up first in the Zulu Battalion, 121. And then he asked and got the posting to 101, which is of course not the South African Army, I understand. I was corrected the other day. But the Southwest African Territorial Force, something like that. So he ended up as a commandant, a lieutenant colonel. He speaks several languages. I started off in English, but if he wants to speak in Afrikaans, he's welcome in between. But you're welcome here, sir. It is Colonel Chris Garland. And may I say again, sir, thank you. Thank you for talking to us. We really want to hear your story. I know a lot of things happened in the background. But may I start by your family? You know, it's an African tradition. Were your parents perhaps involved in the military at some stage, and that is why you ended up in the Navy, or were you just recruited into the Navy by the Loteling system, or what happened?
Okay, I was conscripted when I finished school. Okay, I was conscripted into the South African Navy. There was only 2 of us from my school. I went to one of those peasant schools called Kersney College. Okay, and from there I went to the Navy, and I wanted to become a diver. But when we finished our basic training, which was quite interesting, but not too serious or anything, the Navy is quite a bit of laid-back crowd and everything, and the most of them spoke English with a bit of Kaapenaarse accent and al daai dinge. And actually, I learned to speak a little bit like that, but and which was quite disconcerting for a lot of people, my friends afterwards. But then I failed to get into the divers not for physical. Physical I passed that, but medical reason, I'd had quite a bit of concussion in rugby and things like that, and I had a lot of fillings in my teeth. So the concussion was a problem for the Navy, for the divers, and also the Navy. They would have to replace all my teeth, virtually, that had a filling, to ensure that there were no air bubbles under the teeth. Otherwise, at depths, they pop out and so forth. So then I decided, okay, well, what am I going to do? Okay, I'm going to do a radar course. So that was at the Bluff, because now that's at home, you see. Anyway, that was interrupted. They said, oh, we had athletics and stuff like that. I was involved in that. At school, I ran for Durban and districts and hurdles, and I did walking, speed walking, and I won my race in the speed walking. So I was going to be involved in the Navy, in the inter-department, whatever you call it, arms that they were having every year. I was going to be involved in that. But then in my hurdles, I pulled a hamstring. Typical. And but all that came to a halt when suddenly we were all called to this massive hall in Simonstown. We were training at Simonsburg, SA Simonsburg. We were called to Simonstown into the big hangar or whatever they had there. And these guys in fancy green uniforms stood up there and a bit of camouflage and gave us a spiel about, communism and all the rest of it, and revolution and so forth. And I said, no. I'm going to university. I'm going to do architecture. But now, to go back, that afternoon, I went and signed up into the regional. Now, part of it could be that my father was in the Second World War. He left his school at the age of 16 and went to North Africa with the Natal Mounted Rifles. And then from North Africa, they went to Italy and was involved in the Italian campaign. But on the same side, on my mother's side, her father was actually a colonel in the KAR, because she came from Tanganyika, Tanzania now, Tanganyika, and he'd been a colonel there, and then he was posted to work with the Gurkhas because he was mechanical engineer, and he was with the Remis, and he went to the Gurkhas there, and that could have influenced me as well. And I signed up, and about 2 or 3 weeks later, they put me on a train, and I was through to Joburg. The next day, I was put on a train to Durban. That night, I got there. Normally in the afternoon, you got there in the morning. That day, my dad signed the papers. I got on the train that night and back to Pretoria, and flew out in a Flossie the next day to Wankie, and that's the whole Rhodesian story. But when everything went haywire and Comrade Robert Mugabe took over in now Zim, it had changed from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe Rhodesia, of which I have a very rare item from there. I have a Zimbabwe Rhodesian flag, okay, which are very few that you have. And then from there, it became Zimbabwe, and I saw that career possibilities for me there were very limited. And I then went to an interview, and I'm just trying to think of the guy who the commandant was. I think it was Snyman or somebody like that, did the interviews for a lot of Rhodesian guys. And that's when I was now going to go to 5 Recce. Anyway, I packed all my bongos and everything, and my stuff was shipped down. I left in end of August or somewhere around there, and I came down back to my folks and on the north coast from Durban, about 60 kilos, at a place called Sydney Manor. And shortly thereafter, I was told, okay, you're supposed to go to Hallmark building to the Kop Krimpers and the psychologist to be assessed for 5 Recce and all the rest of it. And I thought about it, nah, man, it's not lekker. I'm going to be doing 7-8 months in the bush again. I've got a new lighty, I'm married, whatever. I don't think so. And I got my regimental number, and my rank was captain again. I went off to Jacobs in Durban and got my uniform, and the next minute I pitched up at 121 Battalion, which is Zulu Battalion, the troops of Zulu. And I then went into when I arrived there were only about 40 guys there, and there was a major in charge of them, a Major Pastorius, and there was a captain, Captain Duplessis, and I don't remember I don't think there was a sergeant major or anything like that. I remember there was a staff sergeant there, but I'm not too sure. He didn't seem to make an impression that I would remember who he was. And then I was instructed then that in January I was going to now recruit 180 troops, a composite company of soldiers, and I would train them up. Well, in the meantime, I went fishing in the Jozini Dam. Not the dam in the river. The dam was only 3% full. Cyclone Des Moines had not arrived yet, and caught myself lots of tiger fish and things like that, and went off to certain other places like a Cozy Bay and stuff like that, and there's a place, Battlier Point or something like that. I went there as well. But besides that, I then started to get myself prepared for January. Excuse me, to train these troops. I then asked for training manuals, and I got a blank look for swart troepe. Opleidingsboeke? Nee, well, actually, so what did I do? I went back to my depot RLI manuals on training black soldiers, and I took them out, and I was given a whole lot of national service guys in January. Because remember, there were guys at Oudtshoorn used to train for the first year, and then the second year, then they used to go and be sent out to the units. So I got these lieutenants and corporals, and I got them together, and we started to do the recruiting. Anyway, we had about over 1,000 people arrived, and we went through, and I did use the same strategies we used to recruit soldiers in RAR, and which was coordination and obeying instructions and stuff like that. And at the same time, the Kokrimpers were down there to assess the guys that they were okay. And they were a bit perturbed because we're now January and it's quite warm at Jozini. And in the middle of the day, I was making the guys run around and everything like that. I said, no, you got to stop now. It's getting too hot for this. I said, listen, the enemy don't stop when it's hot. So when these guys are recruits, if they can't handle it now as a recruit, they're not going to handle it later. Anyway, we went down, we cut down to about 250 troops. And then we started training. And in the selection, I was actually very lucky to catch a guy who was now trying to infiltrate. He was not very clever, and he let on that he had just come through Swaziland to be recruited. So up at the top in Jozini above us, there was a SAP counter insurgency unit. So I invited them to come down and have a chat with him, which took them about 30 seconds, and they took him away for a long discussion, and he disappeared out of our organization. Obviously, he was a gook being sent in to infiltrate an MK or something like that. Anyway, we then went into the training period. I was still living at Jozini. And at the meantime, what had happened was that 5 Reti had been compromised at Dukuduk, and they were told they had to move to Palaboa. And that we were told that 121 Battalion was now going to move into the Dukuduk, brand new Dukuduk base next to the airfield. But I had to continue with the training where I was. So the rest of the unit moved away, and except for a couple of cooks and bottle washers and so forth. And we started our training. And of course, after about 6 weeks or so, very similar to what they do, I think, at Ocean training offices, they have phosphate. So we had a phosphate. And what we did was we told the troops that, okay, there's a problem at Richards Bay. Not that they were trained up to the standard to handle the riots and all that. We said there's riots and all the rest of it. You must get your equipment together and everything. We're going to go to Richards Bay to sort out this, to quell this riot. Well, at 12 o'clock that night, some trucks arrived at the base. I loaded everybody into the trucks. And instead of turning left to go down near Mkuzi, we turned right and went over the Jozini Dam wall. On the wall, I told everybody to debus out contained area. And I said to them, right, guys, you're going on a long walk now. Put them back on the trucks, and we drove, and we dropped the guys off at certain distances along the road, separate groups into syndicates with corporals and lieutenants. And they had a trommel with them, and they had 2 jerry cans. Inside the trommel was a medic's pack and a B-22 radio. And they had A53s or A73 radios. I forget which radio it was. And so they could talk to me where they were, because it was down in they were going to cross the Pongola River. And then from there, their first leg was they had to meet me from the road that goes up to Ndumu. They had to cross the river and then meet me at a rendezvous point at an RV. Okay, there was a long confusion always with the English and Afrikaans and so forth. 2 of the syndicates arrived in time because during the night it rained. And I met eventually all the syndicates came together. And then the next leg, I told them that they had to go to where this hospital mission station was. And which is just north of the Mbazwan forest area, forestry area. I forget the name of that mission, but anyway, I said, I will see you there tonight at 5 o'clock. So off we went. I got into my vehicles and everything. It drizzled a bit and everything like that. And the Makatini Flats is that red clay type soil. It's not sand all over the place. So when you walk, you start to walk on platforms. Remember the old platform shoes? They're the red clay gathered underneath. So off we went. and waited there. And some of the syndicates were in by 11 o'clock in the morning. But the lieutenants were bouncing and the corporals were bouncing up and down and saying, yeah, they climbed on the buses and they came to us. And I said, I didn't say anything about walking. I said, I want to see you there tonight at 5 o'clock. Now the lieutenants and corporals, their brains started to change, realize that we've got to be a thinking unit, not a bunch of idiots that just plod along. And then from there, we went to another RV below the mountains, the hills, just to the southwest of Jazini. And from there, then they had to walk up onto, as you came over the hills, the Bomba Mountains from Mkuzi, there was a shop, and I met them at that shop. And then the next morning, I pointed across the Jazini Dam, and I said, you see that tower over there? And they said, yes, you've got to be there tonight. Okay. So some of the syndicates went down to the dam to think they were going to cross over easy. Because remember, it's only 3% that dam. And they got there and they realized, whoa, there's crocodiles and all sorts of things in the water, a lot of hippo and stuff, that we're not doing that. They came back onto the road, and as they went past the base, at any time during that selection, the guy could resign. Inside the trommel was resignation papers, and what would happen is the corporal would break the rifle in half, put it inside the trommel, and the guy would sign, and we would go and pick him up. Anyway, as the guys came past our base, where it was just at what used to be Department of Labor or Water Affairs compound, guys said, no, they've had enough of this. And about 30 guys resigned there and then. And I used to have a short wheelbase Land Rover, and I had 30 R1s in the back of my vehicle there and a whole lot of papers, and they went and sat inside the unit. They said they're leaving. We got down on the dam wall, and the guys came, and I called all the syndicates in. As they got, I said, right, it's over, guys. Now, we'd been short rationing the guys all the time on this stuff. I said, it's over. Those guys saw what was happening up at the top. They came running down. No, we want to rejoin. I said, and you're finished. You're out. So they were sent away, given their documents, given their clothes and everything, and packed away. And actually, it did cause an uproar, but I'll tell you about that just now. And then I got the guys into the hall. Now, all that time when I'd been doing the training, I never spoke in Zulu. Even when I arrived at the unit, I never spoke Zulu. I just sat there and pretended that I was just a resistance soldier. I'd come here now and maybe speak a bit of Shona, and that's all. And I stood up in front of the guys and I said, right, and for about 20 minutes, I spoke a very good Zulu to them, and I saw eyes get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I brought those other guys into the back of this platoon that was there, and I saw them getting edgy and everything like that. And some of them resigned suddenly out of these older soldiers. And I think the reason was because they'd realized that now I'd heard what they'd been saying and their dissident attitudes and so forth and so forth. And they realized that now I'd bound by them. That I was going to sort them out now, that I'd identified, I'd now opened up, that I knew what they were saying. Anyway, I then said to the guys now, outside there's 2 tents, and they go into the tent. Most of the food that you missed during the week, it's all there. We're going to have a braai. And we had a braai. There were no beers or anything, just Cokes and stuff like that, but there was a braai. So we had a braai, and we carried on with our training. Shortly thereafter, we had to go and do a parade, the opening of Duku Duku Base. So we did a parade there. And then shortly after that, which was 1981, I was sent to Maritzburg with my company. And at the university grounds, we camped out there and we did a parade through the middle of Maritzburg. And that was quite interesting, because while we were marching, our guys started singing. And hey, you should have heard the woman hazering in the street and dancing in amongst the troops and all the rest of it. But we carried on. And then we were sent, then we came back and we carried on with our training. And then we were sent to Durban, next to where what's that gambling place there, where the old Natal Command was. And we were sent there and we had practice and trained and everything like that. And out of the black units, we were suddenly put in front because our drill was different. It was spot on. I worked my guys' cases. In fact, when we did the training, I used to make the guys swing their arms higher than their heads. Now, the corporals and lieutenants said, no. Captain, jy's mal. Said, no. Wait. After 6 weeks, I then said to the guys, okay, don't say a word about lifting your arm. You just keep quiet now. Corporals, lieutenants, you just keep quiet. You just march. And it was at the right height after that. And so when we did our drilling on the parade, as we came down Smith Street, I think it was, West Street, I think we came down past the City Hall. All the generals were sitting there and the president, everything like that. And my guys started singing again. We weren't told we were allowed to, but they just started singing. And that was just unreal. That does, still my hair stands on edge when I think about it. And we marched past there, saluted, and we sang all the way back to Natal Command. And that was that parade. And then at the end of the year, we were then told, right, guys, you're near the end of the year, September, whatever it was, you're going up to Southwest. Really? But we've only done 9 months and we lost these weeks and all that. No, you're going up. So anyway, off we went to Sector 20 Rundu, landed. Oh, the beauty was that at 121 Battalion, we had an old military Second World War airfield, 2.2 kilometers long. No, 1.2 kilometers long. Because what we used to do is the 2.4, we used to make the guys run that one side and run back. So it was a beautiful run for 2.4 running. And the guys used to get good speed, but they were fit, most of them anyway. Natural fitness, because they walked to school and all. Anyway, we then arrived at Rundu. We were sent to Bittersweet, which was the training camp. We did our training there 2 weeks or whatever it was, and we walked away there with 86%, which is chopped, okay? And off we went to Chandelier Gate. Chandelier Gate, we had some incidents there, and not much. We didn't have any combat or anything like that, although one incident we were told that there was a group of typhoons who had come through and they were down at just south of Omoani. There was some water holes there. They gathered there. So we got ourselves together, and I was actually given, working with us was a platoon of bushmen or a section of bushmen. Okay, but that they were a different type of guys. So we were walking into the area before first light, 3 o'clock in the morning. We're walking now into the area, and then at first light, what happens is the colonel from section sector 20 decides he wants to see what's happening in the area, and he flies over in a Bosbok. And of course, what happens? The typhoon's bombshell and a gun. Anyway, they fly in the chopper now with some fancy okies with cut-off sleeves and everything, Vit okies. Now they're going to track for us. We got bushmen, okay, and some of my guys could track anyway, but they're going to show us. Well, it got to a bit of a laugh at with their cut-off sleeves and all that. So you could see that they thought they were the mana. And eventually one of my corporals then pushed the lieutenant out of the way and said, later, Lieutenant, go and sit under the tree in the shade. I'll show you where the tracks are. And took over the tracks and we ran. But the Gooks bombshelled. They went down to one man. And we were too far behind now, because, when you're 2 or 3 hours behind in there and the guy's carrying very light, we're carrying our normal standard first line ammo and the rest of it, it's difficult to follow up. And the follow-up was stopped. And They didn't have 101 battalion type operation, Reactiemacht operations running in that stage. They had a bit of a police unit and so forth, but we never saw them much. We came back to base, but our base, we had a problem, is that there were certain custom issues. My guys used the long drop, but certain other tribal groups that are around with me, they didn't do that. And we would see the little pieces of white gold in the bushes just outside the base where they'd go and cuck. And what would happen is we had flies. Like I've never seen flies in my life before. So what we had to do with our dining hall tent is that we had one of those 16 by 32 tents, and then we put a 16 by 16 next to it, and we put shade cloth on the one side and shade cloth in between. So you went through the shade cloth into the 16 by 16, then you went through the 16 by 16 into 16 by 32, and that's where you ate. But you still had to brush off flies. When you ate, you cut your piece of meat, brush the flies off, put it in your mouth. It was a terrible situation. My guys on patrol one day stumbled upon a guy, and I won't go over the details of, there was no slapping guys around or anything like that, but you know, when a guy lies tied between two trees with his ankles and his head, and you open his shirt and then you covered his head with a towel, and you say to him, "We've now put a scorpion on your chest. You need to tell us, or else we're going to slap the scorpion. You need to tell us where your gun is." Uripin Jepo. And it didn't take long. And he told us where his gun was, and my guys went off and we handed it over, and came Inter took it over. That was about the limit of our sort of joy in that whole bush trip. Except when we left to go back, no, I lie. I had to go to a conference at Sector 20. Now, I'd broken my hand, and the scaphoid on my hand. And we're driving back on the road to go there, 2 buffels. And I say to my driver, 60 kilometers an hour, that's the rules. He was driving a bit fast, so I gently tapped him on the side of the head with my gips, the plaster of Paris, which then broke, and he sort of semi-lost consciousness and went into the bushes. I then got the vehicle out of there, and we drove off to Rundu. When we got there, as we went through the gate, the driver jumped out and ran to the military police and said, he hit me. And so the MP sergeant said, no, why? He says, because I was driving too fast. The guy gave him a slap across the ear and said, I will discuss this matter of you speeding now. Colonel, Captain, go and have your conference. So I went to the conference and came back afterwards, and the man was very quiet after it. He drove back 60 kilometers. There was no arguments about that. I did have an incident inside of the base one time where some guys, there was a little bit of a dissident faction issue, and I then said, okay, well, I'm going to take these 2 sections, and they're going to go back to Rundu, and we will start with arresting them and whatever, because there was this dissident element. And we drove down the road, and they walked down the road, because now I'm going back to Rundu from Chandelier Gate, which is, I think it was about 200 kilos or whatever. And they sort of, we drove into the night and got into the night. And I said, guys, have you learned your lesson? Oh, yes, we've learned our lesson. We will listen now. We will listen. Took them back. We walked all the way back to base, and we sorted that issue out. Then when we were finished with our time at Rundu, and what I used to do every month is I used to take money from each guy, around $50 or so of his danger pay. And I was putting it in the bank account. And there was a bit of a nausea about it. When we got back to base, then that money, I said to them, okay, who wants his money back? And they said, why? I said, well, here's the money for our that we had. Oh, good idea. So that was for our Christmas party. But when we were driving back to Rundu, a very interesting happened. You know those big trucks that they used to transport the national service companies, and they were big trucks with a big trailer in the back. Two trucks would carry a company with all their packs and everything in the trailer at the back. Now they were coming, we were alongside the Kavango River, and we saw them coming, and we were driving, and they were driving quite fast. And the front vehicle clupped a cow, and it flicked the cow right up into the air. And we thought, whoa, here comes a problem. Imagine if that cow landed in the back of the truck, how many guys would be injured? Fortunately, they were going fast enough that the cow landed outside of the back of the truck, and no injuries were incurred on that. Drove back, we got onto the Flossies, and where did we go? We flew directly back to Dukuduku Base, which was the beauty of being at 121 Battalion. Then by that time, I'd moved a house, and all my troops had moved into the new 121 Battalion, and we didn't have enough space. The guys were living in tents. So what I did was I then went to the commandant at that stage, a guy, Commandant John Quinn, and I said to him, okay, why don't we build barracks for the guys? Big A-frames. We've got a whole lot of these Eskom poles, all right? We're talking about these, not 11 meters, bigger than 11-meter poles, and made these A-frames, and we got guys down from the Midlands, and they came and they thatched these A-frames. There was a brick wall at the bottom inside there, but they were open and they were very cool. At each end, they had windows at the top of the A-frames and big doors. So there was a lot of air going in, windows all the way down. And we named them Chaka, Dingaan, and I forget what the other one's name was. I think Kechawayo, the 3 or 4 barracks that we had. Funny thing was that the A-frame Dingaan got burnt down. So there was some symbolism behind it that it caught fire eventually, and troops had been in there a while. But it was able to house all my troops. And then the next year, I was then tasked to train, as that company was given to another lieutenant, and I was to train a new company, which I duly did. And we went through at Dukuduku, we went through a training session there of about a selection session. We had about 5,000 guys came, selection session, and we recruited these guys. And one of the things was we'd wake them up at 1 o'clock in the morning and say, come on, get on to parade. And those that refused, pack your bongos, go. That was one of the quick ones of sorting out a lot of the guys. And we sorted that out quickly. But when we go back to discipline, when I was at Josini, if a guy went on pass and he came back 1 hour late, he had to do 1 hour sandbag PT when he came back. If he was, he arrived back late. And so the big thing that I used to do is if a guy was late and he did sandbag, corporal used to make him do sandbag PT. But my little side to it was that there was another senior person doing sandbag PT with him. And then the colonel from Natal Command came down to find out what was going on, who was actually the original instigator of the unit. And he then asked the corporal, now you were doing the sandbag PT, and yes, and who was doing the sandbag PT? Oh, the troop was doing it. And who else? Oh, the captain. So they said, why? Well, the captain told us that he had failed in making sure the men had the discipline, so he had to be punished as well. The colonel turned around, he just, with totally blew him away, because he was now going to krijgsraad me and all the rest of it. And it blew him away because I did the sandbag PT with the troop. And my theory was that, and more my reasoning was, because that man had failed to be back on time, I had failed in my training. So I had to be punished as well. And I did it quite a lot, but it kept me fit, and I was quite happy to do it and whatever. Then back at Dukaduk, we didn't have much of that sort of stuff going on, but we used to do 2,4s on the runway, and On one occasion, the troops didn't work together. So I said, okay, well, we're going for a night march. We're leaving here and we're going for a march. And we left Dukaduk and we headed off for Monzi on the road, marching with vehicle behind, vehicle in front. And we marched all the way there. When I say march, a jog march and whatever. And when we got to Monzi, they said, okay, now where's the trucks to take us back? I said, no. My friend. We are going back. We're going to march back. And we marched back and we got back at about 8, 9 o'clock. And what about supper? I said, it doesn't work that way. Manje, you're going to go home and eat your supper. I said, I'm sleeping in my office. So I went to sleep in my office that night. Didn't have food. The next morning they had breakfast and everything. They understood the reasoning behind this whole thing. But the commandant at that stage, he couldn't fathom, this is not South African training. Okay, but then you're not working with national service. You're working with black soldiers and they were Zulus. And so in that period of time, we did quite a lot of other deployments. I deployed once to, again to Sector 20, this time to Mbungu Flay. And there was where I actually met for the second time, because when I was at Chandelier Gate, I met Willem Ratta. The name will ring a bell. And I met him at Omani. I went to Omani once. And this time I met him then at Mbungu Flay. And we got on quite well because he was ex-SAS. We didn't have much incidents there, except that the one time I lost a soldier that was killed. That stage, the speed limit was 60 kilometers an hour, and everybody had to be strapped in a buffel. Well, what happened was that the spare wheel, which is on the right-hand side, just next to the cab of the driver, the spare wheel fell off and fell between the mudguard and the wheel. And the vehicle did a flick-flack. All the guys had bruising on them, and everything, except for one guy who was killed. And the reason why he was killed is he didn't strap it. Okay, and which then embedded with the guys, strap in, you're going to live. That was reasonably quiet. We didn't have many incidents on that, in that operation. We left, we went back, we flew back again to Dukaduk. And then from the next trip we did was to Rukana. And we flew directly into Rukana. We operated there and on the river, and I did a bit of fishing in the dam there, in the lake there, was there, and in the river and so forth. Then we had one instance where one of my guys, who I didn't cover it earlier, but a guy called the Carpenter, I'll leave it the name as that, everybody who knows who the Carpenter was doing some external operations up in near Messina in the hills in the Soutpansberg. He had a base there, and he was sending people into Zimbabwe, and there was 2 SAS guys that were killed, and the whole operation was compromised and so forth. Those guys were then, some of those guys, the black guys, were sent to me, or sent to 121 Battalion, and most of them came into my company because I understood them and I could speak their language and whatever. One of those guys, a guy called him Lilo, who actually had been rescued by the scouts in a Zipra base in Zambia, and his feet had been burnt underneath with plastic bags and all the rest of it. He came to work with me. Now, he picked up tracks and he crossed the river, and he followed tracks quite a way, and then he got on the radio and they are joining, there's over 100 tracks at this stage. So I then rushed off to the headquarters and I spoke to the commandant there, and the commandant went white in the face and said, "Where are your troops?" I said, "There," and I pointed on the map. He said, "You better tell them withdraw now, withdraw now." Well, they withdrew now, and into there went 101 Battalion and some other guys, and they had a big contact with these guys. They met up with them, and there was a big contact and so forth. We were in, but the commandant was quite shocked that we would just go in, and when I say that, I was operating in a section, and not like, you know, if you cross the border, you go as an old company and whatever. And he told me not to do that again. And then at that stage, I had these 3 lieutenants, platoon commanders, which I'm reasonably short. I'm 5'6". They were these 6'4", 6'7" oaks. One oak vessel instant had hands the size of plates and whatever. And they were complaining about the transport officer was not giving them the proper vehicles that were working. So, okay, I said, okay, come with me. Let's go down to the transport office. So we go down to the transport office. We come around the corner, and the transport officer was a lieutenant, a colored lieutenant, and he walks up to me and he salutes. My 3 lieutenants turn around and run around the corner and start laughing. I don't click at first until I look at his name. Well, my name's Garland, and what was his name? Garland as well. So they were hysterical around the corner, laughing and giggling. Needless to say, I never had a problem with transport after that. But I was my boot, you see, and I had a lot of transport out of that after that. We then left, came back. In the time that I was at I'm just trying to think now. Let me just get myself organized here. Sorry, I'm just trying to. Right. Okay. When I was at 121 again, although I was trained mortar, I had to go back to Oudtshoorn, and I had to go and do the mortar course again. That was quite interesting, because we worked in the red and white system. They work on the normal degrees and whatever. When I was in support group RLI, and there just happened to be at that stage a warrant officer there at infantry school who was at the Rhodesian Army Infantry School, and we had a chat and so forth. And there was another guy who had some new computerized type targeting system, and we challenged him on getting onto target and so forth, and our system blew them away. And at that stage it was what was his name, Swartant, I forget, was in charge of the infantry school, and he looked at how we did the system, and it worked like a bomb. And he said we had to train the guys and show them how to do that. Although I don't think they ever converted to our system, but it was a good learning lesson that computers don't always work better than that. So from there, I had to do anti-tank, which I was fortunate enough to be trained on the Milan and so forth. The UNTAC was out at that stage. We were in the Milan phase and the 106, and we did a lot of training on that. And then the next course that I had to do at Oudtshoorn was battle handling course, which was quite a nice course. I enjoyed it. And then I had to do military law, which was at the Army College. And I enjoyed that as well, because in the regional army, the military law was a lot simpler and stuff like that. And then I then at that stage then decided, we're talking about now 84, 85, that I needed to go back to operational unit. So I applied for a posting, and they decided that I must go to 101 Battalion. I must go to 101 Battalion. And at 101 Battalion, I then arrived there, and I was sent to run a company. And that was at Italy base. But when I got there, there was another company there. So there was 2 companies. B company was there. We were standard companies. We're not Reactiemacht companies and Caspers and stuff like that. And there was a guy called Duffy Conradi. He was in charge of B company. And we did a lot of running around in the bushes and stuff like that. And the one time I sent one platoon into Angola, just across the cup line. We got information that there would be guys walking on this pathway. And I got this guy to do an ambush there. But just before the SWAPO got to his ambush position, across from him, we wouldn't have known, but there was a fruit tree. And the SWAPOs diverted that 200 meters or so to go to that fruit tree to gather fruit. And they got out of his kill zone. So he decided, okay, he's going to attack, which he duly did, and nobody got shot. No, they never got any swap or anything like that. But it was interesting, but it did cause a bit of a nausea. Because I forget who the colonel, Onrus Barend van Deerden. I don't know if you know the name or whatever. But anyway, he came to visit us at the thing there, and we gave him tea and coffee and scones and all the nice stuff. And he listened to our story, and he left. Quite happy, he understood why we'd done it and whatever. Then the one day I had troops up at Alpha Turin, A Tower, which is up by the border. And the one troop, I don't know what he was doing. I think he was snuck off to go to a cooker shop or something like that. And he tapped on a mine alongside the road, and it blew his foot off. I drove up there quickly and had to treat him before the chopper came in. And when the chopper came and everything, he'd lost a lot of blood. I didn't have drip with me or anything like that. Came in, and myself and the medic, we had to then squeeze the drip to get the blood, the saline solution into his body, and which we duly did, and everything. He survived, and the chopper took him away. Then we had an incident where the Tours attacked this one tower, and we reacted to that. And then out of that attack on that tower, we followed up some tracks. And this is where a bit of confrontation took place between us and SAP and the Kufut, where one of the guys the Tours had been shot at this place, and he had fallen against a fence next to one of the houses, the villages. And as we're now approaching it, following the tracks, out of the bushes comes a Casper and whatever, takes a body, throws it in the back, and disappears. Okay, so there's our body gone. Well, it's what happens, you know. Every now and again, they Kufu to come and camp inside our base, but we tell them they had to camp outside, which they duly did, but they drank like anything inside of our base, and then they would go. We had another incident where we had a lot of dogs coming into our base. So what we did was I got the guys to take all our rubbish, go and put it in a spot outside the base. We put some claymores. And one night when there was a large gathering of dogs, went bang and got rid of everything one time. There was no more. It was all, how would we call it, hygienically done. There was end of dog problem. Then we were then sent on an operation called Ops Jabba. And we crossed the border and we drove inside, and late in the evening we drove to a place. And the funny thing about the Wambos, you could say to him, where is village so-and-so? And this is in Angola. Now he lived all his life inside of Southwest, and he would say Wambaland, and he would say it's over there. It is Kupepe, which means it's a long way. So we would drive and we get there, and then they would say, wait, stop. And we stop and say, we're going to go and have a look. And they'd go off in the vehicle and look and say, we are here at the village. They'd ask it. They just had this guiding system, that homing device inside, the inborn homing device that they could just, you hardly ever had to use it, use a map with them. You just say to them, okay, we ask them where the next village, they're going to ask at the next village. Next village would show point direction. Off we'd go and we'd come to that village. Anyway, while we were patrolling in this Operation Jabber, there was a lot of troops inside there. It wasn't an attack on bases or anything. It was like an area domination. Kufut was allowed to go in about 10 kilometers across the border. 101 Battalion was up at, I think it was at Jamba or wherever it was. They were operating mainly there. I'm talking about the reaction force. We were in our area and a couple of nationals. Anyway, in our operation, we then recovered over 30 caches. Our biggest cache was mainly because we nearly drove into the sea, where the roof collapsed of this cache. Inside it was 100 B-10 bombs, rockets, some landmines, and some spare parts for 12.7 and machine guns, some ammo and stuff like that. But the thing was that the foolish thing was that our guys broke in when they found it. Before they called me, they went bounded in down the little steps into this place, and that was foolish. Lucky for them that the little box mine that had been put in the steps going down had been there so long that it had collapsed, the thing, and it didn't go off. If they had gone down there, this thing was connected to the cortex. The guy obviously knew what he was doing, to a landmine in the middle of the cache at the bottom. So when they stepped on it, it would have blown this whole up with 100 B-10 rockets and stuff like that. When I use the word rockets, I'm talking about rounds. You know, B-10 is a recoilless gun round. Okay. That ammo and stuff there filled the whole bin of when we were now sort of leaving the area to go back to our base, we then I would have a guy say, I've just got a report. My internet is a little bit unstable, but let's see what happens. The guys, one of the guys would say, stop, 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 and our vehicles would all stop. He'd climb off or run off into some of the bushes there, and where those palm trees, little palm trees clumps were, and he'd come back out with a couple of shirts and a couple of trousers and sometimes with an AK and whatever, and ammunition. And then we'd drive on a couple of kilos, and the guy would say, stop, 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 and another guy would jump off and run. Obviously, they were able to not identify where the stuff was being hidden. And we collected a whole lot of stuff, which we filled. Actually, with that was another load of filled up. Okay, then we left. We were told to move from Itali base to Umbalantu, which is more towards Rakona, which we duly did. And the Umbalantu is quite famous because the fact of it is it had the Kremataatboom, the baobab tree, and in that baobab tree was a little chapel, which had a bit of history that during the time of the Germans occupation there and so forth, that one of the Ovambo chiefs and so forth hid inside there away from the Germans with his family and so forth, so they couldn't exterminate them, which apparently there was a lot of removal of the Ovambo hierarchy at those days, allegedly. Then in the Ovambo base, we had a couple of patrols and stuff like that, and it was quite a nice base. We had incidences there where guys didn't want to listen certain times, and I was able to sort them out. I won't discuss how it was done, but there were certain measures with a piece of PVC piping, black PVC piping, where you discussed issues in the rear end in most guys, and they realized that wasn't. Then I had to, I had two guys go AWOL one night, and when they came back, a woman arrived at the gate and saying that she'd been raped, and she identified the girl. So I was instructed to write a board of inquiry, which I then wrote a board of inquiry. I then sent it through to the OC, where I suggested that we have a summary investigation which proceeds then into court-martial, blah, blah, blah. Needless to say, somebody in their admin submitted it through to the GOC, who was Meiring at that stage. But at that stage, the OC was up at Jumbo or in that area, Naoni or wherever it was. And he was then sent a flash message, and he was flown all the way back to headquarters, GOC's headquarters, and Windhoek, and where he was then told that the Board of Inquiry must be sorted out properly and whatever. Needless to say, I will come back to that issue. Later it came back and they were taken away, and the normal procedure was taking place for those guys. I was then posted at the end of the year. I was only there 1 year. At the end of the year, I was given near the end, a posting that I was to go and take over Start 907 SDFK in Messina. Okay, that's interesting. That's what I want to do, a reactiemacht unit. And I was then posted through to Messina. Now, at that stage, my family had left. While we were in Oshakati, we lived in Oshakati, but Ndangwa was where 101's headquarters were. I lived in Natali base or Balantu. But while we were there, there was some, I used to get, sometimes I used to come home. Once in a while, I'd come home. And the one time I came home on a Friday afternoon, and I was having a shower. No, sorry, I lied. It was a Sunday morning. I was having a shower. And I'd got through a window into the house. So there was nobody at home. I wondered why. Oh, obviously they've gone to church. So I wormed my way through a window, got into the house, had a shower, and I was sitting there having a shower, and I heard everybody coming back. Okay, and the Mrs. came in. I said, "Oh no, how's it going?" And all hugs and kisses and the rest of it, and grabbing the lighties. And Mrs. burst into tears. I said, "What happened?" "Oh no, they rocketed the Oshakati last night." In a house down the road, the family had taken cover in the toilet, and the only part that was left of that house was that toilet. They survived. Well, they had to have a lot of therapy done with them to bring them back and sort them out. The Mrs. was lying in bed. At that stage, we were waiting the birth of our daughter, and the light in the middle of the roof fell down with that explosion onto the bed. The kids, the two boys, were lying in the bed with mother, with attack. I then was posted through to, hang on, let me just tell you one other story. Interesting. I used to catch a lift with the guys on a Monday morning, on odd occasions when I was home on Monday morning. Now, there were certain guys in 101 Battalion who they had fast vehicles, like a Golf GTI and an Alpha Sud, which were quite fast. And it used to take us from Oshakati to Ndangwa 12.5 minutes. Work that out. That's 215 kilos on a Monday morning with taxis, goats, cattle, everything on the road. It used to be quite frightening. I still, when I think about it now, my hair stands on edge. What we used to do, that was stupid, but we did it. And then I was posted out when also at Oshakati. I got involved with certain people from SWATF. And while I was at 121 Battalion, I had a staff sergeant who was in 5 Recce, but he refused to go to Paraboa, and so he became my company sergeant major. He was an ex-Salute Scout guy, Pete Curley, and when he laughed, it sounded like he was drowning, and it was quite hysterical because we were in the Umflozi club one day, and he started laughing, and another guy started banging him on the back saying, "Oh, you're all right, you're all right." He nearly cornered him. He didn't think it was funny that he was laughing. And I met Pete Curley there, and also another guy, a guy that I'll just leave his name as Shullies. Okay, and they came and had dinner at my house one night, and the boss of the unit, and a guy, Marius Meyrink. His brother used to be a SABC commentator, news reporter. And Marius had been in 2RL with me. And he was the 2R CEO of Swarek. So I had Marius, we had Pete Curley and Shullies come and have dinner at my house. Well, Shullies sat there watching TV, and I must have fed the boys and all the rest of it. And they ate, and then afterwards, Shullies said, "Do you mind if I have a snack?" He said, "No, the fridge is there." Well, he climbed and he emptied the fridge. Yeah, it was a cool guy. And one day when I came back, I went into the ops room, and at Sector 10. And when I walked in there, there was a guy with boots on, long trousers, and all, and a shaggy bush jacket and a beret on his head, looking like a cow patty. And he was in a maroon beret type thing. And he was talking to this Colonel van Heerden. And he turned around and walked out. And as he walked out past me, I said to him, "Shullies." He got to the door. He turned around and said, "Ah, Chris Garland, 1970, whatever it was, at Waffa Waffa on tracking course." But it's got a memory like that you couldn't believe. Okay, when I was posted out now, the family left, and I then drove down in my red Datsun tracker, which I used to go to Atali base in the tracker, and 1 or 2 times I drove through the bushes to come back to Ochakati. Because that was a shortcut. And when I drove past, I came to a place, Meershop, and I stopped there for the night because I left late in the afternoon. And who was there? Swareki had moved in there. So we had a farewell feast and a party. Next morning, very early, I got into the vehicle and I drove back. I drove through to Windhoek, to Uppington. I camped in a campsite, slept the night there, and with me was my dog. This little dog, the other dog that I'd gone up with, he died in the bushes there in Oshakati. But drove through, then from there I drove through to Pretoria. I slept the night there at my old OC's John Quinn's house. The next day I drove through to Messina and slept at the hotel, just in the motel, just as you go into Messina on the left-hand side. Of course, the next day I then go and to SMA, South South Military Areas headquarters, sitting outside there waiting to speak to the colonel, say, "I'm here," And while I was sitting there, then this short commandant walks past me. I'm a major at this stage, and I stand up, salute him, "Good morning, sir." He looks at me, he says, "Oh, you must be Chris Garland." I said, "Yes." He says, "Well, I've had a problem with my 2RC, and he's been indulging in one of my captain's wives, so I had to fire him." I said, "Oh." He said, "Would you like the job?" So I said, "Yes, but you're going to have to teach me." He says, "Not a problem." Now, he was well known for his training abilities at Oudtshoorn and stuff like that. His nickname was the Klein Kuban. And he was a hyperactive guy, really hyperactive and very knowledgeable. And of course, he was one of those kind of guys that he said what he felt, and to the disapproval of a lot of people, but that's the way it worked. Anyway, so the guy was running the captain who was running the company there, major, sorry, was staying there, and I was to now come to RC of the unit. I then was given a house inside of Messina, very nice house on the way to, as you're going out on the way to Chippies. And the base, 116th Battalion base, was at Ottenvilla Mine. Went there and I started to learn how to do it. And we recruit courses and all the rest of it. And we had some dogs and stuff like that there. We had 3 German Shepherds, 3 Rottweilers, and 3 Australian Kelpies. Very good sniffer dogs. They were trained in bombs and in drugs and stuff like that. And there were some interesting stories we had with them. The one Kelpie, you know, I'd be about to go on to parade, and I'd be in drill order and normal step-outs clothing, and this dog twice, he just leant up near and he peed on my leg. Needless to say, you know, I didn't find that quite amusing. Everybody else found it amusing. And the third time when he did that, when he came to lift his leg, I grabbed him on the nether regions and used those 2 round things to hold him up in the air, so just his front legs are on the ground. And I said to him, you do that to me again and I will rip these things off. Do you hear me? Needless to say, I put him down, and from that time, when I used to walk next to him, he used to turn away. He used to face his ass the other direction, not look at me. Okay, so it never happened again. And then the Rottweiler, the one Rottweiler used to chow his handler. Regularly, the handler would go in there and that dog would eat him. And I would say, right, and I'd be called there, and I'd go there and say, right, what's happened? I said, get a grip of your dog. Grab it, get it on the short collar, let's go up to the sick bay. And there was a Dr. Nell there. He used to run comrades and all the rest of it. Nice guy. And as we had approached there, the guy would say, oh, it's happened again. And old Doc Nell would come out, and he would say, stand there with his hands in front of him and say, Brutus, what did you nou gedoen? And the dog's head would go down and hide away from it. Let's see your arm. And the guy would show his arm. He says, okay, right. Brutus, sit. And he'd go inside there and treat the guy and treat him off and sort it out. Funny how his command on the dog about the handler. I think the issue was the handler was a bit afraid at that stage. Now, we were training recruits. Most of them were Sutus, but we had 907 as part of the unit, and we had a Bereda, a mounted infantry platoon, also involved in the unit. And they were at the other mine nearby, where they were situated there. And they were, first of all, they had buffels to deploy the 907. And then we got a whole lot of Mingwes in. I don't know if anybody's ever seen a picture of what a Mingwe looks like. It's a bit of a flat front type of vehicle. You had 2 different versions, one with an automatic gearbox and one with a manual gearbox. Quite nice vehicles. A Civic invention, but they worked well. And then that went out and we were given Caspers. But the Caspers we were given were the newer model with the big wide window by the driver and the passenger side. Okay. I don't remember what Mark 4, whatever it was, made by TFM or whatever. Yeah, they were very good. And our guys used to operate a lot of that. We did have a couple of 907, did a lot of Sterling work. In fact, they used to, a lot of the illegal immigrants coming in, we had the Kaftan fence along the border, and which was an electric fence. And then it had sisal in between and another electric fence. That was further along from the Sand River going east and from Messina going the other direction, going in the west. But between Messina and the Sand River, they had the Kaftan E, which is an electrified. Now, I had a sergeant who used to live at the border at Beitbridge. And he used to drive through along this Kaftan E. And the one day he was driving and he looked over the side and he saw something and he stopped. And as he stopped, the guy was coming through illegally, lifted his head up and he touched the wire. And that was exit stage left for the guy. We called the engineers and the engineers took him away. He was stone dead. The electric fence had killed him. Then we trained up all these troops. We were training in 907, was running around doing thousands of kilometers every month, and getting a lot of captures and a lot of illegal immigrants. Times of 200-300 guys at a time, and in would come those big trucks and load them on, and and a week later, what happened? The same guys would be caught coming back through the border. We'd send them back, deport them across, and they'd be coming to try and come across again. Then they sent us a guy with the microlight, but the microlight's not these delta wing microlights. It's one with the wings, proper wings, and the motor in the front and all the rest of it. And the thing used to fly down the border to, I'm just trying to think what the place is, Crook's Corner or whatever it is, by top part of Kruger Park, then turn around and come back. And a lot of times it picked up guys coming across the river, and then 907 would go in and stop them. And so, and then the one time, what would happen is 907, they'd be picked up by the microlight. 907 would then just drive to where they were, but they would drive through fences and stuff. And behind them, the engineers had to drive behind them and fix the fences. and they'd load all these guys on and be going and take it out of the country. Now, the stories are so many of Otten Villa mine, and for that microlight, we actually made a runway, and it took us 2 days to make a runway for that. In came the engineers with their front end bulldozer type thing, not a proper cat type bulldozer. It was a wheeled tractor, and made the runway, and the grader went in and graded, and we had a perfect runway in the right direction for wind and all the rest. And it worked very well. And there were instances where the microlight broke down, crashed into the river. When I say crashed, landed on the sand until it was fixed and everything, and then it was taken, flown out again, and brought back. At one stage, mounted the Y2 M79 rifle grenade thing with the 6-shot, and they used to practice shooting it, and that also was quite effective to get the guys. If they were coming across the river, they would fire in front of them in the river, and they would blow up and they detonate in the sand, and the guys would turn around and run away. Then most of these troops that we were training, they were being trained up to go to Sukmakar, where 117 Battalion was. And then after that, then we were training up troops to go to Leboa. They were all shooters. But when we had mine incidences there and stuff like that, these shooters just didn't like leaving base. They were not very happy about the mine situation. So it was better to send them off into Leboa at Sukmakar and thing, where they can handle that type of situation. They weren't built for that type of we had a situation where Bruce Springsteen was singing in Harare. And when he was doing that, the boss, the nickname, and we had to take our 2 Kelpies, and we had this exercise called Exercise Kirby. I don't know if you know the Kirby vacuum cleaners, very expensive ones, very good ones. And what we would do is in line on the vacuum cleaner line, there would be a joining point where we would put those old 35 millimeter camera capsules, which had a bit of carbon inside of it. And all the vehicles that were going up into Zim, we would then put a bit of, on the driver's side, we'd say everybody out of the vehicle. On the driver's side, we'd put this foam by the window, wind the window up, put the vacuum and suck for 1.5 minutes. And then we'd take it out and we'd go and put it inside of this hall with 1 live and 2 inert capsules, and we in what or random order, but we knew which order they were, because the bottom of there was marked white, and you'd put it down. And then we'd get the dog to go past, and they were 2 meters apart. If it sat in front, then there was something inside that vehicle, either drugs or there was bomb explosives. Needless to say, there was many instances where guys were caught, and we had one instance when the guys were now coming back, where one of the taxis was stopped, and the dog, we then put the dog inside of the taxi, everybody out, and the dog sat on the driver's seat. The custom guys didn't play around. They just cut the seat open, and inside of it was this little square put inside of the seat foam, and there was one spot on it. And they said, and what went here? And he said, I have a gun. And they said, yes, do you have a license? He says, yes, here's my license. I said, right, put him into a vehicle, and the cops then drove from there to, I'm just trying to think of the township just outside Mamelodi. Drove him to Mamelodi to identify the weapon, and then drove back with him. That was one incident. Then we had some smart oaks in a 704, whatever it is, BMW, the fancy pants one, the big one. They came back from there all with Indian guys with their gold chains and looking all mooi and laka. And we could smell in the vehicle. You could smell the ganja was in there. And we said to them, okay, where's the ganja? They, no, there isn't. So this one sergeant I had there, what he did was he took one of those capsules, the 35 ml capsules, and emptied to one side, opened it up, put it into the inline thing, and then sucked out the vehicle. And they got about 100 grams or whatever it was. And cops took them away like that. There we are. They thought they were quite clever, but they weren't clever enough. That was the situation. We had instances where 907 were chasing tracks near Vembi. Vembi is to the west of Messina, Beitbridge, and they were chasing tracks, and they ran into Pom Z. We had some guys injured there. The biggest thing was right near the end of my time there was that we, close to the end anyway, Kritzinger was now in charge of the unit. Rose had left, Anton Kritzinger, and the Venda army had a contact with some MKs, and one corporal, Venda corporal, was killed. But the Venda guys had wounded one of the MKs, and the two other guys were carrying him. So I was sent to I'm just trying to think, let me get my mind in order. To Madimbu, yeah, sent to Madimbu, and we were now, and 907 arrived there, and these guys had crossed the border, and they'd gone across the border, one of my old Fumuravanu bases, Chikwarakwara, and they'd gone in there. Now it was part of the ZNA bases, and they'd gone to hide inside that base. So some 5 recce guys arrived as well and everything. And there was a plan now. We're going to go in there and go and get these guys, take them away from the ZNA. In other words, attack. And we were getting ourselves prepared and all the rest of it to go in. And at about 8 o'clock that night, first of all, we'd done our planning session, everything like that. The guy said, okay, we're going the first night. I said, no, my friend, you don't know how the gooks work. You go in there at 1 o'clock in the morning. No. I said, you go in there 1 o'clock. By 3:30, they are preparing for base movement. That's how they instilled at that time, the gooks should operate. Okay, at 8 o'clock that night, then a colonel from Far North Command phoned, and he then said to me, listen, we've picked up on the comics, which was the interception, radio interception, that a land cruiser had come down and picked up the three guys, the injured one and the 2 other guys, and taken them away. Stand down. I said to him, can't I go in? He said, luister nou my seun. Do not disobey what I say now, because there's an international situation. There's no reason to go there. I said, okay. Next day, drove back from Madimbo, drove back to Messina. And then in that time, I did a couple of courses. First course was that I did there was with counterintelligence course. Rose wanted me to go and do the counterintelligence course. And then I then had to that was a very interesting course, actually, because it showed me a lot of things going on. And then, and in actual fact, it showed me that one of our guys who was ex-Rhodesian forces was actually operating as an agent and so forth. And I had to then contact Chief of Staff intern. They brought in guys and took him away, and he was away from the unit for over a year. And they confirmed that. But his story was funny, that he said he had gone down to Beitbridge to meet some family and that the ZCIO had captured him and kept him at the other side and interrogated him, and then he escaped back to us. Well, he turned. That was the end of him. He went to that place just north of Pretoria. There's a little underground place there where he remained there for as far as I can remember. He didn't come back to us at all. The other course that I did was the junior staff course. And that started off at the Army College. And after the Army College, it then went to Kimberley, Dani Turon, where we did the int part of the phase. And then we then did the main battle handling phase of it at Loasha. Now, in that period of time, we went home for a weekend. We were given more than a weekend, interphase thing. And I caught a lift with a guy, Spanners, I'll just remember his name, to Far North Command. And there the boss man was to meet me and the adjutant, and they were recruiting for more soldiers for 118 Battalion. And we got there, and they were at the Department of Labor, and they'd been saping quite a bit, and we got into the Corolla, and we headed north off to Messina. And as we left past the airport on the left-hand side, I felt the vehicle. I'm sitting in the back seat because I'd written exams late, and it's now 11 o'clock at night. The vehicle rock. And then just before you come where the road is going straight, and then it does a bit of an S-bend between two hills. I don't know what happened. I woke up, that was on a Wednesday night. I woke up Sunday night in Petersburg Hospital with some cracks in the skull and 3 ribs and whatever broken. And the most important part that really upset me about my whole thing was that my boots, which were those waxies, which were the boots that the SAS used to have, and I had still from the Rhodesian, they had been stolen while I was in hospital. So I was really the Helen about that. Needless to say, I then was put on light duty for a couple of months. Now that meant that I'd now broken the course, and I was supposed to be on light duty for quite a few months, and which I did, but I came back to work a bit early. But you know, when you have serious concussion, your aggressiveness becomes quite intense. And if I used to leave my office in the headquarters and head in any direction, the guys used to climb out the window the other side. They knew there was a problem coming. Shortly thereafter, I was then sent back onto the next course to finish the final phases, which I duly did, which was now we'd come back to, from Loatla, we'd come back to the Army College where we were doing the counterinsurgency phase, from the conventional to the counterinsurgency phase. And there I started to listen to certain people talking, and in the back of the course there were 2 guys from, I'm just trying to think of one of those independent states inside there, black guys. And this guy was talking about the MK and this and that and all the rest of it, and traditional And then I asked a nasty question like, do you speak, as we spoke about earlier, do you speak black language? What do you mean? I said, can you speak Zulu? No. Can you speak Pedi? No. Can you speak Tswana? No. So how do you understand how these guys' brains work? Okay. Now the three guys in the back from the back of the course is from the Independent States guy, black guy, are starting to laugh. Okay. Because then I turn to them and I start speaking to them in Zulu, and they speak to me, although they are Sutus, Tswanas, they speak to me back in Zulu as well. And I said, you guys don't understand. This is what it's about. You have to learn the cultures of these guys to understand what goes on inside there. That's what the war is. Everybody stands here and talks about McEwen's hearts and minds and everything, but you don't understand his cultures, his courting procedures, his marriage procedures, his birth procedures, like going to the hills and things like that, and then burials and all the rest. You don't understand. So how would you understand how he works there? It became quite a contentious issue. I used to say to them, well, this is not how it works. This is how it works. And the guys were stuck in this counterinsurgency mode of Kopa. That's all that counted, Kopa. But my version of Kopa is turned Kopa. You see, Kopa on your side, not dead Kopa. Anyway, it became quite a contentious issue on the course there, and needless to say, I passed the course and went off and went back to Messina, where I then requested that I be posted. But it was an interesting, my reasoning was interesting. Loyalty, you cannot, if you're not loyal to somebody, then, and specifically when he just about killed you, then it's time to move on. And I'd been told before that if I stayed the unit another year, I'd become the OC. Said, post me. So they posted me, and I went to Far North Command into the ops room. And I was in the ops room for quite a few months, which I found very interesting. And there was a lot of interesting factors there, mainly about the operations and the intensification of operations and stuff like that was taking place. And I then was dragged in by the general, who was the GOC, was Minna Fari, and a Brigadier Fires van Vuren, ex-Ricky, and Swanepoel from the ops room, to play bridge, because my granny had played bridge and she knew it quite well. Well, after sitting there at 10 o'clock at night playing bridge, I then decided, well, I needed to move out away from this bridge. And what I had to do was I had to set up my partner so that we failed regularly, which I did. And then I was not invited anymore to play bridge. At that stage also, then we used to have conferences every Monday morning. The general would call us into the hall. We were at St. Stithians College or whatever it was. It was a college inside of Petersburg, was where the headquarters were. Then after a period of time, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, I was told, right, you're going to headquarters unit. You're going as the 2RC. And there wasn't a 2RC's post there, but I was now sent to 2RC. And I used to, I had a little office in a caravan type building, one of those Capellino type buildings that they had outside. Now, in headquarters unit, there were ducks and there were chickens and there were bantams. Oh, no, I lie about the ducks, sorry. Chickens, bantams, and silkies. Now, wherever you walk, they're just chicken cup all over the place. Now, for me, that's not how military bases are. And that was the OC of the base, had these chickens and whatever. But so in my office, there was a little concrete wall that had a bridge across it from my office bridge. And in between, there was this meter gap from my caravan and this war. And so what I did was I used to throw some grain out there, and I come to office with my .22 and my canal damper, and the chickens would come there, and I'd beat someone on the head with the 22. I'd go down there, I'd take have a bucket there, sit there, put it in a bucket, close the bucket, bring it. That night I'd go home with the bucket, feather the chicken, and the chicken would go in the pot. Okay, well, the chicken slowly diminished. I then went to the labor and working in the place, and I said, you see the bentons there? Those bentons, awesome. They take all insects out of your vegetable garden. Well, those started to get less and less. And then I went to the National Service guys, and I said to them, listen, guys, those silkies, they lacquer in your garden. Jeez. Well, those started to go as well. Slowly but surely. Got less and less and less. And the boss man was getting quite excited about how his forces were diminishing very quickly. Then I'd been there quite a while, and the OC decided that, or decided he was going to shoot the president's medal. I think they shoot the president's medal at Kimberley or wherever it was. And so he disappeared on a Thursday morning. Friday morning, I was called into the general's office, and the general said, go to the OC's office, put all his documents and everything into cardboard boxes and send it across to Group 45. There's no die bevelvoerder. So sort of stunned silence. And I then packed all his stuff, put it in, and sent it across to Group 45. Then I had a discussion with his clerk, his snicksticky, okay, and where I voiced my opinion on how she would behave. Her name was Liz, and her nickname was Lost Liz, and I discussed how she would behave from there on. And she then shortly thereafter asked for a posting, which then she was going to go to the log site, work there. Anyway, I then had also with the chief clerk, I had a contact with her because her husband was a commandant, and she used to walk around with his rank. Now I was a major, okay, I hadn't become a commandant. So we had a discussion one day, but the discussion was in the RSM's office, and that is OC headquarters office. RSM headquarters unit, and the RSM, the command RSM was in the office at the time when I blocked her, and I addressed her like a troopie. So we sorted out our differences there and then. I could see the command RSM was trying to get out of the office. I said, play still, play some of you are. And my one was trying to get out. He was an engineer, RSM. I said, play julle moenie weggaan nie. Staan hier so. And they stood there. I said, ek kyk na julle bly. And they stood there, and I gave her a stick and whatever. Well, the benefit was that issue was all the negativity I got from her. The next day, she was sweet as pie, and we were the best of buddies after that. And admin flowed lekker. Anyway, I'm a fisherman, and one of the admin soulmates, a guy called Rocky, was there, and we decided, okay, I'm going to go to Tzaneen Dam. I had a boat, which I still have now, and we're going to go to Tzaneen Dam. We're going to camp out there a little bit, put up a 16 by 16 tent, camp there at night, and fish the next day and whatever. Anyway, we arrived there on the Friday afternoon, put up our 16 by 16 army tent, lekker and mooi, put out our stretchers. We're going to sleep, boats there ready in the water, we're going to fish. And at 5 to 12, some oaks arrive inside the caravan park, and they put on their music. I'm a barbecue in a Bobby world. At 1:30, the same music is playing, the same record just being played again and again and again. So I walk outside, cock my pistol, I fire 5 shots into the ground outside there. I go back and I go to sleep. In the morning, the caravan park is empty. Everybody's gone. We carry on our fishing. There's no more noise here inside there. I used to fish quite a lot in Ebenezer Dam as well. Now, that was very interesting. One of the most beautiful dams I've ever been in. The water was clear. At one stage in the time that I was there, the dam was very low, and I could see barbel deep down, about 5 meters down. And when I say barbel, I'm talking about 2 meters, 2.5 meters long, these barbel. But we used to catch bass there. Now, have I lost touch a bit here now? Have I gone from Far North Command? Yeah, I'm at Far, yeah. Okay, sorry about that. I get sometimes. Now, so we used to fish there a lot. And the one time I dropped my pistol in the water, I dived down about 5 meters and grabbed it. And when my 2 lighties, who are now 40 years old and whatever, now, when they lost a lure, I'd say, get in the water and go and get it. And they used to have to dive down and go and collect their lures at whatever depth it was. Well, it turned out quite good because my one son, he's a 1,000-yard man now with a rifle. He can shoot, and he shoots very well. And the other one is a Microsoft engineer, A+ Microsoft engineer, MCSE. So I'm sure that it got them in the right direction. Back at Far North, my budget was small budget, around 186 million a year. And I had to, every year I had to do a budgeting. And that used to take me about 2 to 3 weeks. Remember, there's no compos there, no computers. You've got this big pile of about A3 pages, and on it would give you fuel, so much. Spares for SAML 100, spares for SAML 20, spares for, and you had to do a budget on that type of thing. Your labor in the estate, skryfbehoeftes, and so forth. All that sort of thing had to be food, and all. You had to sit down and do it because the general lived and worked inside of your base. You see, OC headquarters was in charge of the base. The general was the GOC of the whole area. So it was quite a big budget. We then lived like that with our doing these budgets for 2 to 3 weeks. And we had incidences there. My counter end, this is where my counter end came in quite valuable. Is that at one stage, the one paymaster was, we identified some discrepancies in his financial situation, and he was, the military police arrived. And then the second one arrived, and what was there for about a year or so. And we also identified some discrepancies there as well. And he then turned around when the MPs arrived and said, I used to work for a special unit. If you do arrest me, I will open my mouth. So I turned to the major MP and I said, make sure he's in solitary confinement to tell the Board of Inquiry is convened and so forth. And that's what happened to him. And he went on. You know, there's so much that took place in those time there. The one humorous situation was that the general came to me and said to me that we had a parking lot and it had a whole lot of jacaranda trees growing. These jacaranda trees were quite unruly at this stage. So he said to me, Chris Garland, make a plan, trim them a bit. So what I did was, I got SAML 20, And we stood on the top of the Sawmill 20 and we trimmed all the jacarandas to just above the height of standing on top of it. Well, when he came in on the Monday morning, whoo, there was just a deathly hush. And in the conference, he said, no, manne, ek wil net hê julle moet nou kyk daar buite. You must go look outside and see Chris Garland's Delville Bos. He's now renamed the Delville. But he had quite a sense of humor. But then we had a bit of a drought, so they never sprouted properly. So it stayed like that for over a year. Another humorous incident, I thought it was humorous, was that it was the time when on the Saturday, the Sharks were playing the Blue Bulls. Now, the Oaks there were all Blue Bulls, Northern fans. Me, I'm an Natal boy, Sharks. Anyway, on my Monday, on the Friday, I stand there and I say to the Oaks, and we finished the conference and I said to him, Generaal, ek wil net een ding sê. Ek sien julle manne hier so maandag met julle swart armbande en jou tissues vir jou trane. Ons gee vir julle. There was a deathly hush, absolutely deathly hush. And the colonel who was there, he said, ooh, Chris Garland, nou soek jy vir kak. Anyway, Monday morning, when the general comes to sit in his seat, he sits there, and on the board behind me, the ops board, I had a computer with all that dot matrix type thing, and I said, and I'd written there with the thing on it, Cowboys Don't Cry. Remember Nas Burte was playing then? And he said, Cowboys Don't Cry, and I had some woman, Trana, and all the rest of it, and the score. And then everybody came in there, and then suddenly everybody took notice of the board with this thing, and I'm sitting there with the board behind me, and the general sitting that side. And of course, he comes in here and he sits down, and before he looks up and he cleans his glasses, I lean out the window and those wild banana branches, I pull them up and I stand there over my seat, behind my seat. And he looks at me. Now there's just a deathly quiet. And he says, Chris Garland, vat jou piesangblare en gaan buite en betoog in die straat. So I go right turn and I head towards the door. He says, net 'n oomblik. Ek wil net vir julle mense sê, ek het vir Natal under 20 gespeel. So the guys went berserk. Vryer. Fence jumper. Anyway, that was the one. I think it's the next year after that, on this Friday, we now moved out of that ops control room, that ops room to another one. On the Friday conference room, I say to him, guys, black armbands on Monday. We're going to give you again. Well, needless to say, we give him again. When the general comes to sit in his chair, I've got a whole lot of the pisangblare, this wild banana thing. I put it on his seat. He had one of those seats with all, and I put them across. So he had, now he was a 6'4", 6'7" man. He had to get his way in there, but he didn't know what he said a word. It was deadly harsh. Deadly harsh. Anyway, I then went on a general battle handling course. I think it was some course that they had. I had to go to Loata and did the course there. And I found that quite enjoyable. Then I asked to do a demolitions course. They said, what does a commoner need a demolitions course? So I said, well, by that time I become a commoner. So I said I would like to go on it. And then added to that course, I did assistant bomb disposal. It was quite humorous. The guys didn't know why I wanted to do that. But anyway, we had a call, after getting back shortly after that, we had a call out to the fuel depot inside of Petersburg. So we had to do, and we had to assist. My RSM was the bomb disposal man. I had to assist him. And then just trying to think of other little issues that took place. We, oh, one thing that I did find, I found inside of Barnworth Command Headquarters, they had sand grouse, the African grouse, okay, which in Shona they call them a Tikwara, and in Zulu they call it tendela. It makes a noise. Anyway, so every now and again I used to resup myself. You know, I didn't have to go far out into the farming community to go get some impala. I would get myself 1 or 2 grouse for supper and braai. And then also I found one time, I found 3 inside the base. I found 3 hedgehogs, which I then kept them, but then I took them out into the countryside and I released them there and let them go, because to feed them is very difficult, the food that you have to give them. Then came where we had to decide whether we are going to go for free and fair elections, which we then duly had while I was at Petersburg. And the White Oaks decided that we were going that route. And shortly after that, then we knew that we were going to elections. And I then decided that after seeing a signal from Chief of Staff Defense, those who want to go off on early retirement and so forth, I then sent a letter direct to Chief of Staff Defense, and the admin, SSO1 admin, then found out that I'd done this, and he said, "You can't go directly." I said, "Well, the signal came from Chief of Defense. It did not come Chief of Army. I've done it and they've accepted it and whatever." He said, "I'll stop it." I said, "No, you can't stop it. It's done." And then, of course, in March of '93, I then retired out of the Army. In the meantime, medal-wise, the Rhodesian General Service Medal, Rhodesian or Zimbabwe Independence Medal. I then got the Pro Nutro Pro Vita. And I then had the Pro Patria, just what our sarcasm we used to call it, the Pro Nutro. I then had the 10 years Good Service Medal, the General Service Medal, and the Southern Africa for External Operations and so forth medals. And that was basically, there's lots, as you go back and you start thinking about other things come back in your mind. I would want to go back and start tell you funny things that took place when I was in 121 Battalion, like I was at 121 Battalion when Cyclone Des Moines arrived. And you believe it or not, that the rain was so heavy that you drive on the flat road, you could only drive at about 30 kilometers an hour. And when I drove to Dukuduk from Matuba, 30 kilometers, otherwise you'd lose control of your vehicle on the road. And then the Mfolozi River came in flood, took the bridge away, and how we then reconnected. What I did was with a 75 mil Stim practice grenade, put it on the end of an R1 rifle and fired it across to the southern side where the other guys then grabbed it, because we'd put a 60-pound nylon on it, and then they pulled a thinner rope across, and then we attached that to a heavier rope, and then they pulled the rope so we had communication. In the meantime, myself, a guy called Brett King, and the Parks Board then had a boat, and we ferried people across. And when I say ferried people, I'll talk about, it doesn't matter what race it was, plus empty coffins, full coffins, one time with 2 Honda 4s in it. I then had goats, I had sheep, and one time 1,000 kilos of yeast that I had to transport Sasco Bakery across there. I still have a T-shirt, the Sasco T-shirt from that time, and it's 83, 84. And for days, we would ferry people across, but at lunchtime we'd blow a hooter, and then we'd take an hour's break, where Brett King would then come Next to me, he had one of the first Z-craft catamarans with 225s on it, and he would throw me the rope, and I'd get onto my skis, and we'd ski on the river, okay, and with the crocodiles and the hippos and everything. But it was very scary at the beginning because I saw an elephant wash down there. It was nearly white. We were tumbling with the sand had taken the skin off. It was nearly white down there. Big trees and things like that. And then the cops on the south side by the Safari Motel were trying to stop people come across, and this one taxi bypassed them and just went straight over the bridge and disappeared. We never found it again. And there's lots of stories. And the Jozini Dam from 3% in 4 days was 110%, flying over the top. Those are sort of kind of stories you go back and you think about and so forth. And I don't know if there's anything else that I should get involved in. Any talk, if you want me to talk again about specific issues, I'm very prepared to talk about that. Thank you for the opportunity to talk. Thank you.
Well, I must tell you, Colonel, we really enjoyed listening to you, so thank you for that. I just want to make 2 observations here.
Yeah.
One is one of the legacy viewers, a fellow called Kemp.
Yes.
I'm going to say his surname. I have a message for him. Kemp, ons hou daarvan op legacy as die blou pille op lemoer kry. You know, there's something wrong with this fellow, so he's like a global fan. He doesn't understand life. But anyway, we will educate him. And of course, we would love to speak to Chris Uhlenberg. We all know about Chris Uhlenberg.
I ain't going to talk.
Fantastic man. Fantastic man.
He's not going to talk.
Yeah, he won't. No, we approached him already. He won't do it.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying to everybody who thinks perhaps that we can, no, he won't. He's just not, he doesn't want to. And I recall that Kirby system. We used it ourselves in the police with great effect. It was a fantastic system. I wonder what happened to it further. But now I need to ask you a few things. You were fighting in Rhodesia, and then it became Zimbabwe, and now years later you're standing in SADF uniform and you're looking across towards Rhodesia, which is now called Zimbabwe. What goes through your head? I mean, perhaps you see your old uniform on the other side. What do you think?
I'm very sad. You see, because I worked with the Fumo Revanu and how things could have been different. If the Fumo Revanu, the SFAs had been operating, let's say, instead of starting to operate around 88 or, no, hang on, 70, you lose touch of time, 70, instead of 78, it had started in 76. We were getting inroads into the Victoria province, the southeastern province. We were getting inroads in there that were certainly changing the control of the guerrillas over the population. Okay, so we were just too little, too late. If we had have concentrated on that, yes, at one stage we were killing 1,500 gooks a month. It was a totally different war to Angola. You know, Angola was more mobile warfare, armor and stuff like that. In Rhodesia, it would never have worked. Okay, and also in Angola and Southwest, you didn't have the hills to do the observation points and stuff like that, and restriction points for ambushes and all type of operations like that. So one was suited for that, but we could have done more if we had a broken down. The problem with the conscriptions, I was very upset about it, was when I came back down here, is how national servicemen were not treated well as far as I was concerned. And like when the national service lieutenants and corporals used to come to one battalion, I used to make sure every guy's bed was made up. On his door was his name, okay? And we would I would say to him, there's your rooms. You can go in there. If you wish to change, come back to me so we can change the barrack room. They each had a room, and we changed the layout of the rooms and so forth, the diagrams, so for emergency purposes and stuff like that. And then we would have a tea afterwards and introduce them straight away as they arrived. We'd have a tea and chat and sit down and talk, and this is how it goes, and without going into a lecture. First of all, you'd have tea just to let the guys unwind, feel comfortable, and that's it. Now, you can't have soldiers who. Big difference was like in RLI when we did our 100-miler march. We were put into syndicates as recruits into syndicates of 6 or 7 guys together. No corporal, no lieutenant, nothing like that. And we, when we did our 100-mile, we dropped off at 5:30 in the morning. They would say, okay, here's a map, here's a compass, here's a protractor. Find where you are now here, and on a piece of paper, there's your grid reference tonight. Meet you there. And they leave you, a whole lot of recruits together. And you would have to walk, find your place, get there. That night, they would say to her, right, here we are. You're going to do a night compass march. Here's your first RV. Do your set your compass and so forth, and off you would go and do your march. And you do 4 or 5 legs that night. The next morning, they give you a piece of paper and say, there's your next grid reference. Then the next day after that, there's your next. And finally, on the last run, they would say to her, okay, there's your grid reference at a place called Ngezi Dam, at the campsite, the camping site that was there. Well, we're on the other side of the dam marching towards it. And when we get there, then they would then say, they would say, well, there's the camp over there, and the gear directing staff were standing with their hands folded, looking at you. And they would say, and some of the guys decide they're going to walk around syndicate. We, of course, went straight there. And there were some drums lying there, conveniently lying in a bush, and some ropes lying there, and some planks. And what we did? We took 2 drums, our syndicate, put the drums, put the planks on the top, tied them down with the rope, and then paddled across with it. No instructor with you. They started to instill that, I'll use this expression, can't touch me, I'm the best thing you ever see. And when you walked out of there and you put that green beret and an RLI and your badge on, that was it. You were the best thing since sliced cheese. And they were very good. RLI was, I know guys who came from the middle of Joburg, besides Benoni and places like that, in the middle of Joburg, never been out of Joburg, doing his national service, recruited into the Rhodesian army. You couldn't believe their tracking abilities. He'd never lived in the bush, and he could track. Where I saw some Rhodesian lighties who came off farms, they couldn't track an elephant track across a dry riverbed. That type of thing. And they believed that they were the best things, and they were professional. But when they went back into town, to places like Le Cocteau, the nightclub and everything, they were hooligans. Many times arrested and in jail and everything, but by Monday morning, they were out and back at the unit. That was the difference. And you can't blame the national serviceman, because I don't believe that his standard of training instilled in him that professionalism. And anyway, he's called up, he's forced to be there. So why should he be professional? It's the same thing as happening now with the Russians with Ukraine, where they're putting the conscripted guys to fight against Ukrainians who are fighting for their national independence. And now you're putting conscripted guys to fight against it. It ain't going to work. We should have possibly looked at more regular units. When I say regular, permanent, permanent force units. We should have looked more at that type of thing. You look at 3-2 Battalion, the results that they had. Look at 101 Battalion, the results they had. Look at the recce's, the results that they used to have. It should have been there, like plane writing. But we can always sit back and retrospect later and be so smart ass that we think we know, the answers. It's too late to think later. The thing is that our appreciation of the future situation was not correct. And as the insulting term, the thumb suck. And we should have looked forward in it. We should have read more of McEwen. And I know so many people who quote McEwen and everything, and they just took McEwen's book and finish at the Army College on their staff course, senior staff course or junior staff course. Look at that book as McEwen. I actually have a copy of one. It cost me about $500 for an Enid Blyton sized book, and the guys do that all over the world. You see them, they read the book, they talk about it, but they don't walk about it. And he was brilliant for a Yank. I'll give him credit. He was brilliant in what he wrote. A lot of people didn't take time to look at things like Sun Tzu and the Red Book. Read the Red Book and things. If you read them, then you would understand what's going on inside of them. And the thing is that people give Mao Zedong too much credit. Sun Tzu gave him all the ideas. He plagiarized a lot of Sun Tzu's strategies and tactics in his taking over of China. Anyway, and that's it. It's the way I can think about it. That we had a lot of failures, as did we go right back in history. We go back to the Athenians and the Spartans. They didn't stand together very much, but then when they stood together at Thermopylae against the Persians, 3 million Persians, 300 guys blocking the gap, and enough time for the Greeks to get their act together to hold off those type of things. And then at the same time that the Romans, then there were more slaves in Rome than there were normal people. You can't be run by slaves, Anyway, so those are all things that we don't sit down and make a long-term evaluation, and we underestimate on a lot of aspects. We underestimate the enemy. I'll give you an example. The border at Mukumbura in the northern Zimbabwe, on the Mozambique border, from there to the Mavurudana Mountains, a place called Ditito, is 80 kilometers. The Gooks used to cross that borderline at last light. By the next morning at 5 o'clock, they were in Ditito. As you take out a 150,000 map, it's 80 kilometers, right? But inside of that 80 kilometers, you've got to climb the Mavurudana Mountains. He's got 2 mines on his back. He's got 2 biscuit tins, the 600 round 7.62 by 39 round thing, in his pack, and he walks all that distance. We go and patrol the borderline, and by the time we try and get the next day, when we pick up his tracks, he's already dispersed amongst the population. So we underestimate our enemy that we are operating against. The same thing happened with the Americans with the Viet Cong. Same situation. But anyway, those are stories you can go on and on and on and on forever and ever about. Yeah. Is there anything else that you can help with?
Yeah, I've got quite a lot of questions actually, and I would like to invite you to come and speak to us about that book of McEwen. Yeah. I recall when I got trained in a police counterinsurgency units, we had some Rhodesians there in the SAP now. And they started talking about the Malayan principles.
Yeah.
Would you believe so? There's a lot of people listening here who does not know what I'm talking about now.
Yes.
And it's my opinion. If you don't know what the Malayan principles is, you don't know counterinsurgency. And I know these are fighting words, but you really ought to have known it. And you've answered quite a few questions for me now, because we had a fellow on here, actually a friend of mine, Martin Venter. Now, Martin Venter had an interesting life. He was drafted, conscripted into the South African Army. Then he decided, well, there's a war going on. It's his own words. There's a war going on up north. And so we got in a vehicle with a few mates and they joined the RLI. And they went through the RLI and they came back to Bloemfontein for their parachute course, did their parachute course, and then he got recognized. And so by the time that he got back to Salisbury, the MPs were waiting and he comes back to South Africa in handcuffs. And they sent him to 3-2 Battalion. Like, you're either going to 3-2 Battalion or you're going to have serious problems. So he went there and a week later he's taking part in a battle of Swati. Fantastic fellow. But he said something interesting to me, because we know each other for many years. And he said, because when I was at RLI as a troopie, I had a backman. I didn't need to worry about cleaning my boots, things like that, which we did in the South African Army. So would you say to me, sir, you've been in both, and I just want an honest opinion. I'm not grinding against any of the two forces, not at all. This is for history's sake.
Yeah.
Were the troops treated perhaps more professionally, sir, in the Rhodesian Army than they perhaps were treated in the South African one? The troopies, the lower ranks.
I think yes, they were. They were trusted more in the RLI and other units there, SASC and Scouts guys and stuff like that. Yes, they were. They were treated like gold, in fact. But let me tell you, you have an accidental discharge, that's 28 days, DB. Okay, and you went down to Bulawayo, and there was guys there who were rough oaks there, and you dug a trench, or you dug a grave, and you had to bury a box of matches in it, and you dug the grave down, and then they would say to you, okay, bury the box of matches. You bury the box of matches, and then they cover it over, and then they say, well, the guy is a Muslim. You've got to point his head towards the east. Which way did you put the cigarette, the matches in? And the guy would say, dig it up. And you had to dig it up and then show it right, to put the matches in the right direction and that type of thing. You didn't mess with them. You ran all day, except when you ate, and you did that in a standing position, you ate, and when you were in DB. You didn't, if you went AWOL, you went to DB. There was too many influences, political influences as well. Mommy and daddy, you can't really blame them. The guys there were not conscripted, they volunteered. Here, the guys conscripted. But at the same time, if you treat him with respect, he will start to respect. And I found one or two things that I did find is that, how do we call it? Not honor, but loyalty between different ranks, between NCOs and warrant officers and officers in the Rhodesian Army was there. Here it wasn't there. Okay. The treatment by national servicemen on other national servicemen was. I remember going to when I did my mortar anti-tank course. There was a Corporal Visser there, my height, and full of. He thought he was the best thing since sliced teeth, and he said, "Not quick enough. Go to that tree and go and collect a." But now we on my course, I'm a captain, okay, and I've got staff sergeants and warrant officers and so forth. And he says, "Not fast enough. Go to that tree and go and get me a leaf." Well, the one time he made a big mistake. When he pointed from the training area, he pointed up towards the hill, where the water towers are. I don't know if you know where the water tanks are at Oudtshoorn. So we left. I said, "Guys, follow me. And we went and we ran up top there and we got one blaar for him and we ran back. That was 3/4 of an hour running up there and running back. And we came back and there's your blaar. Now, at that stage, Swartland Serpentine saw this and realized, whoa. He went to the corporal and says, "You know what you're playing with? You're playing with captains and sergeant majors and stuff. They're going to eat you for a million, man. You're playing games with these guys. You're wasting time. That's time they should be training." Well, needless to say, Corporal Visser is a typical guy, national service guy, who you give him 2 stripes now, he thinks he's going to mess, because he's a course instructor, he's going to mess other people around. It don't work that way. It never worked like that in the Rhodesian Army as well. I can go through lots of stories where people tried to be funny and tried to up there, got a slap and he was sorted out one time. Here, there were issues that I really think that we would have got a lot more out of national servicemen. Would have been a more relevant situation than we had. But those are all easy to say afterwards, after you've been through it. Where was I standing there, not drumming my drum and saying, treat national servicemen better? But then again, when you do treat him better, then he takes a chance, because in his training, he hasn't been treated or trained to be loyal and have a personal image of himself that he's serving his country. He doesn't feel like it. He's forced to be there. That's different. I speak about a lot of Rhodesian friends who were conscripted as well in Rhodesia, and they had lots of issues about that type of thing. But their attitude there was, the instructors were regular force instructors who had combat experience, and they gave them that element of trust and treated them right. The independent companies, when the guy's doing his national service, they operated right. And you had national servicemen who would be there some months, and then the next month, a couple of months later, he's a corporal or a lance corporal because he's doing his job right. It didn't work so well in the South Carolina. But then again, did it work in America when they went to Vietnam? One of the biggest casualties of the American forces was a terminology called fragging, where the senior NCOs and officers, the troops would throw a grenade and frag a guy and injure him or kill him. Same thing, we talk about, and we go back then to the Russian situation, tried to take on semi-professional guys in Ukraine. Same thing's happening. I'm just waiting for the China-India conflict to start. The two big mass populations, and we'll see how it works. Where the ideology of Mao Zedong and Sun Tzu work against the Indian situation. It's the way we're living in at the moment. Yeah. But we have other issues which are not military, but they are in respect of command and control of populations, which are taking place at the moment. And we've got all these theorists and the rest of it, except that some of the stuff is now being exposed. That when I talk about COVID and stuff like that, if you want to get there, where it's been proved that the strategies that we used were incorrect. And things like the mRNA vaccines and all the rest of it. Let's leave the subject. Let me change it. Go back to talking military, because it could get forever. But it's how you control the masses. And the same thing, you use that same technology when you're operating against an enemy that you want to control. People say, well, that's a military. No, well, it's not. The same strategies and techniques and tactics are used in both, whichever way, in politics, in military. And then, to quote Metternich, war is purely an extension of politics. We dance to the tunes that the politicians do that. And they're the guys who should have actually told us how to treat our national service conscripted force. These are the guys. But you see, they don't care, because for them, politics is a profession, and military is not part of they don't believe it's part of their lives, except they're the ones who send the young boys to go die. They should send the older boys to go die, because they don't waste ammunition and they don't have to sleep as well. And they don't think about sex every 15 seconds. Yeah.
Well, you know what General Patton said about a soldier who wouldn't, I can't use the F word now, yeah, but apparently the man did say that if he doesn't want to think about this type of thing every 15 seconds or minutes, he's not a good soldier. I believe that Swartland Serfontein became officer commanding special forces. I'm hoping to record him at some stage as well when I'm in South Africa now coming. But I need to ask you a few questions here also, which has been bothering me for a long time. Do you feel that they were discriminated against as the Rhodesians or Rhodesians in general when they joined a defense force? And I'm not saying, well, you answer that.
Yeah, let me give you an example. I was at a formal dinner one night in a unit, and the officer commanding then proceeded to stand up and said, "We're not talking about Rhodesians now, we're talking about something else. Die mense wat praat die taal van die antichrist, die rooi taal." Okay, yeah, okay. I'll leave there, okay, because they're still back in a concentration camp, okay. And one of the majors stood up, who was Afrikaans as well, and he said, "You will withdraw that statement, sir. Otherwise, we leave this dinner now." And he said, "Maar ek maak 'n grap, man, ek maak 'n grap."
No, was it a joke?
That was part of it. Yeah, it wasn't a joke. And then that's for the Englishman, okay? You know, good morning, gentlemen. As you know, in the South African Defence Force, we speak English and Afrikaans 50%. Nou gaan ons aan met die rest van die dag. That was it, you see? And yes, there were issues, but then there were some people who came down who bullshitted. I'm going to tell you straight now, they lied. About their abilities, about their professionalism, and I know a couple of the guys, and actually one of them was a major that he was a captain, sorry, who was caught at Army College cheating in an exam. That just discredited. Yeah, you see, you're little Rhodesians, you cheat on the exams. Of course, there were some guys. I remember I at one stage I did counter-int course and everything like that, and I was graded at secret, but I wasn't graded top secret. And then Minafari asked, "Have you seen this document?" I said, "No, General, I'm not graded at top secret to see it." Turned around to the guys, "Why is he not? He's an officer commanding of a unit." And yeah, well, there's a couple of issues. One of them was that they graded certain people. If you were a vrijmetselaar, immediately you lost your secret. Okay, your secret level. If you were involved in certain organizations like Lions and all the rest of it, and Rotary, that was considered as a security risk. But you could be a brother and you were top secret. You see what I mean? Now, my dad had a very good friend. He was a lawyer in Pretoria. What he used to do was he used to buy guns and ammunition, and then he used to sell it. Now, he was well known. I was at his house when certain top generals and Minister of Defense came into his house. I was there. And he would sell guns to UNITA and to Renamo. And then suddenly we had the Komati Protocol without telling him. There he's stuck. Now, the people used to give him money to buy the guns. And then he used to sell them, and then he used to pay them their money back with a profit, big profit. And then suddenly, now, the reason is that one day he visited us at Mkuzi, landed in Mkuzi. We went up to Cozy Bay with certain generals and whatever, and amongst them was an American. Was that they believed that he worked for CIA. Okay, but you can open the big book of the Suid-Afrikaner and his name is in the book. You see, now what they did was they betrayed him. Now he was stuck with all these guns, and he couldn't sell them. But the people who'd given him money before had made more than they had lost, lots more. And then he was charged with the fraud situation, and he went to jail. Okay. So also the loyalty. You know, we go down the road like I'm just trying to think which one. Was it Delaray was riding to the conference outside of Potchefstroom, and he was assassinated? Oh, I say no more. Sometimes we are our own worst enemies, because we have got so many little issues. We've got the Methodists and the Catholics and the Presbyterians, hulle staan nie saam mekaar, okay? And die Blaurokies and the rest of it, they don't stand together, okay? Then if you're a Jew boy, you're not so kosher. And if you're a Greek or Pora, then you're also not so kosher. You know, we've got problems. We have issues, and we don't stand united. That's part of our biggest problems. Yeah.
You mentioned something very interesting to me. You said that when you were recruiting black soldiers at 121, the Zulu battalion,
yeah,
you had like an over too many of them arrived.
Oh, plenty.
Now, how would you say why? We're talking about apartheid, and yet they were standing queues to join the battalion. Why do you think that happened?
Same in Rhodesia. When we had recruit courses there at Balabala, we had thousands standing there, okay? We had 2 black units in Rhodesian Army, okay? Were run by white officers, okay? NCOs, and at that time, NCOs and warrant officers were all black, officers white. We go a little bit back, and we go back to the KARs, 1 to 6 KAR, run by white officers, but the guys stood in line, boy, they wanted to be there. They want to be part of it. Rhodesia, the same thing. Guys, we had guys flooding in who wanted to be part of Fumarevana. Okay. Same thing here. It's not just a job, because we made it tough. We made it tough for the guys, but they still wanted to come there. And you had guys who, my brother is in a company. That is why I'm here. That was the situation. We had lines, the main gate at Dugudu, back to the road, which is the road was from Matuba, stood in line. The guys stood in line there. 2 to 3 deep, that road. And I think that road is about 1.5 kilos long. Standing there, waiting for job. And employment was not such a big issue as it is now. You know, we got 47% unemployment. I don't think it was anywhere there like that. We didn't have the BEE, bankrupt SS ideology and whatever. The guys wanted to be part of the whole. They wanted to be something. I think I'd not necessarily. The unit was nicknamed by the Zulus Amabu Toingwe, the Leopard Battalion. You know, which they have a lot of respect for a leopard. But when you go back to the Zulu times, okay, the most senior regiment was the Mtunsulwan regiment, and the regiment was that the shield was the most white out of all the other regiments. The shield, okay, except it couldn't be pure white. Only one shield could be pure white. That was Ichakas, the king's shield. They wanted to be part of it. I don't think that they wanted to join to turn against. Otherwise, they would have done it in 1994. You know, they would have gone in, and in fact, a lot of those guys, some of my guys that went there, one of my corporals became a RSM at the Natal Command, but he had at that stage he developed a drinking problem, I had admin clerks and stuff like that who became colonels, full colonels. One of my guys, when I was at 116 Battalion, yeah, he was the admin officer. He became a general in the SADF. Yeah. So, and another, a sergeant major there became a very senior officer as well, a brigadier or something like that. That general has retired now, because he was probably about 5 or 6 years younger than me. So he would have retired quite a while back. I have seen him once since then when he came down here. I think that the whole thing was, it wasn't just a job. You know, yes, you're getting 3 meals a day, except when you're in the bush. Okay, you're sweating like hell on the parade ground. You're running 2,4s. You're doing fieldcraft. You're doing all sorts of things that you wouldn't do in a normal job. And then you head off in an airplane into outer space, and it was to Southwest Africa, where everything is flat. There's no Ntabenia, there's no hills here. It's just the flat. You can't see more than 400 meters and so forth. They still, the word went out, they still joined. Same thing in Rhodesia. And I think you'll find the same thing. My mom told me, not my grandfather, but my mom told me one time they 6K are deployed to Burma in Malaya. They got onto the ship late afternoon. The next morning they woke up and they were, there's just a sea. There's no land. They had chaos on to calm everybody on the ship until they got to Burma and Malaya to operate. So you know, it's very difficult to understand why they are there, why they wanted to join, but they did, and they did it freely and willingly, and with the sweat and tears and everything that comes with soldier life, and the lack of sleep and lack of food sometimes, and lack of water and all those sort of things. You know, the funny thing is that when we go into a cultural issue, Shona people, when they eat, now you can be in a bush and you've got that much in your water bottle. Before he eats, he washes his hands. That's all the water you've got. So it's enough to wash your hands. You eat, you wash your hands afterwards. Those were difficult times for those guys. And sometimes you walk 80 kilometers, like in Mozambique, 80 kilometers of water hole. When you get there, it's a fetid water hole where there might be a dead animal lying in the water there. And you have to clear it and clean it out and make a sieve it out and get your water from there. And then we were issued with things like halazone tablets and stuff like that, which you put in there to stop you getting diarrhea. That's it. So, you know, when we try and sit and we think, you know, we try and reason why did they join, it's very difficult to understand that. With Zulus, yes, he's a warrior type guy, all right? But with the Sutu, northern Sutus, the Zulu name, excuse it, the nickname for the northern Sutus is Mkoto Mtabe, which means the mongrels who lived in the hill. When Mzilikazi swept through the northern Transvaal area and so forth, and with his Mfekani of the darkness. Okay, Mfekani means the darkness, like when Nandi, King Chaka's mother, died. Then there was Mfekani, it was the darkness. Nobody, if you laughed, you were killed. When they swept through there, the Indevalley of Mzilikazi, then that's the nickname that they acquired. They're not very good. Out of all the soldiers I know that, and I've worked with every group, from Xhosas, Southern Sutus, the red, they are the less soldier-like of the group. How's that for politeness, eh? Okay. Then out of the Shona people, they're not all the bravest of bravest, except down the Makaranga in the southwest, the southeastern side. Okay, in comparison to the Ndebele. and the Xhosa that you have there. They're not the same. The Shangans are also very aggressive, but they love to drink and party and all the rest of it. But they're good trackers, and they are not afraid to go into battle. But one issue that I do know is that it doesn't matter what troops they are. When you go into battle, you're in the front. Forget about the tactics. You know, you're in platoon headquarters and company. No, it doesn't work that way. You're in the front. If you're not in the front, then there's something wrong with where you go. That's all those troops. It works that way. Whereas we are very tactically minded and in our thinking, and like the RLI's thinking and so forth. And really, there was some, you know, in that unit there was some stormy okies, but they still were professional. You know, understand that there's a lot of culture issues with black people. That you know, if a person dies, if there's a lot of witchcraft involved and spiritual stuff involved in their lives that influence them to do things that are irrational. In our thinking, not in their thinking. That's the problem. When we try and think, and I have many arguments with people when they start saying this, I said, you're thinking like a white man. Now you're trying to tell a black man to do something like that, but you're thinking like a white man. You think he's going to understand what you're saying. I said, you have to change your mindset. You have to think how he's thinking. And the only way you can do that is to understand him culturally. You'll never fully understand, but you've got to understand him culturally. And then it'll make it a lot easier for you. I've had instances where guys have stood up in front of their troops and tell them that we're going to do this and we're going to do that and everything. And then afterwards I stand there and say, come here. What did you tell you? This is what I did. No, I said, that's not what you said. This is what you said. No, I didn't. I said, no, the way you said it meant that, not that way. You see, that's like if, for example, if you say a guy comes to you with a problem and you say to him, I'll think about it. I'll come back to you tomorrow. Never give an answer straight away. I'll think about it and come back to you. In the next day, if you say, no, you can't do that, then you did not think about it deep enough. I mean, hang on, but that's not what, that's the way they will think. Not all of them, but many of them culturally will think that way. If you don't give him the answer he wants, then you did not think about it enough. That's issues that we will have difficulty even with understanding how the Chinese think, how Indians think, you know, how Muslims think. Although I've done a lot of studying on that for specific reasons, I need to understand why certain things. And if you read Nostradamus, also there are certain things inside there that he has said. But that's why I do it. Yeah. Is there anything else I can help?
I have one last question for you. Were these black troops discriminated against by the white troops around them?
We're talking about here or in Rhodesia?
Both, if you wish to answer.
When we talk about discrimination, were they made to go into more difficult position operations in white troops? No. Were they given unfair rations in comparison to white troops? No. I saw that physically in both armies. Were they given different pay? Well, this army was a conscription army, and then you got national service, regular forces. I think that most of them were quite happy. You found a lot of them driving around in cars after a while, and like a normal PF soldier. Okay, I don't believe that it was the same amount as a normal PF corporal would get and whatever. The Rhodesian army was eventually exactly the same pay, but they lived differently. Their money went different directions. the food was the same, their entertainment was the same, the service was the same. You know, I think the unit that saw the most combat experience in the South African Army was 32 Battalion. The most combat experience. Okay, that was, originally it was Bravo Force under Carpenter, and then it developed into all the Silver Falcon and all the other guys. I think that some of them did not stay, some of the commanders there did not stand in the same shadow as Carpenter. I don't think they were the same quality as him. But they certainly had a lot of combat experience. I think they were paid well. They seemed, the guys that I met, I didn't meet many of them in operation, seemed very happy. They operated professionally. And like most tactical soldiers, when they had to run, they had to run. You know, when you look at some of the operations they got involved in, some of the operations I got involved in I didn't get any like that type of stuff in Angola, but in Rhodesia and in Mozambique, when I had to run, I ran. But then again, I was with black troops most of the time. And I went into places, like the one operation we did at a place called Chioko, Chioko, C-H-I-O-C-O. When we went into that area there were 16 RLI guys and 15 of my guys, and me as the 16th guy, and did the same operations, reacted the same way, did the same stuff, got paid the same. Oh, we used to get the exorbitant amount of $1 a day danger pay. Well, you know, it's good money. I don't think that it was blatantly discriminatory. They had their own units. And you know, here in the South Africa, we had 111 Battalion. We go up to 115 Battalion, 116, 117, 118. I'm just trying to think. 21 Battalion, 121 Battalion. They were all black units around. I think there were some other units. I didn't see them much. Only when we, on 2 occasions, we went and had a gathering of black units at Lens 2-1. We had inter-units competitions and stuff like that. That was interesting. And certain units behave differently. You know, whoever's in charge of the unit and everything, and their development in the early phases was very influential. I think that there possibly was, but I can't speak out straight and say, yes, there was that incident there and that incident there and so forth. You know, when they're in Bush, they were handled the same. When you had 121 Battalion, we had barracks. They all stayed in the barracks. The corporals, be white and black, had the same corporals barrack room. The sergeants had their barrack room. The lieutenants had their, although we didn't have black lieutenants there in 121 Battalion at that stage. Those came later. We had, when I was at 116 Battalion, of course, we had a captain there who was the admin officer. We had his chief clerk was a sergeant major, black guy. The quartermaster was a captain, black captain. So, you know, they drove the same cars as we drove. But there were other influential factors that drain their money a lot more than ours. You know, when I was doing security here, you employ a guy, when for the first 6 months, it's him and his wife and child. Within a year, he is now supporting another 8 to 16 people. That's what happens. But then again, people turn around and say, well, that's because of the unemployment that we have now. You see. I don't know. There possibly were instances, but I'm not maybe I blind myself to it. But I worked differently with the soldiers. I carried the same pack as my soldiers. Yes, I had a batman who in the bush would make my tea, but while I was making my tea, while he's making my tea, I'm sitting and sending in my sitrack or my position and stuff like that. So we were working it. When he made the cup of tea, it was the same. I would have half of that cup. He would have the other half. We used to have the aluminium water bottles. So we just put the water bottle on the top of the gas stove. We didn't have S-pits and so forth up here. We had these gas cookers. And you put your water bottle on the top, turn the lid upside down on top of it, and cook your water, and that into my my cup, and his cup, one tea bag, sugar, like the packet of sugar like that, which is about over 100 grams, half in mine and half in his. You put the teaspoon in your teaspoon, which he floated in the sugar. A bit of powdered milk. And that was the way we lived it. If we ate, when I ate in RLI, we would stop, our stick would stop. I would be sitting in this direction. My batman would be facing me, looking over my shoulder. We normally squatted. And my two other guys with the machine gun on that side, facing that way. The other guy facing the rifleman or the grenadier facing that side, because we'd have a gun and a guy with a rifle grenade. Okay, and then we'd face each other with BK Ujka in the middle, one Dixie of Sadza, Steva Pop, the other one with our bully beef or whatever, with maybe some tomatoes we got in the fields or some chili in there and whatever. And then we sat there with the two Dixies. Being the senior person, you ate first, you took a bit of Sadza, rolled it in, ate your, put your bit of meat, dipped it in the meat, and you ate all of it. You didn't eat half your sadza and dip back in. That was very bad manners. You ate all your sadza with your meat, and then the next time you took again, took some sadza, rolled it in your hand, dipped it in. That's right. And when I stopped eating, then they all stopped eating. So it's difficult. In RLI, we became part of it, of the life. We didn't get the same ration packs. But for me, I eventually, to be part of the scene, I got the same ration packs as them, so that I could eat it. There were different things that white boys liked in their ration packs in comparison to what the black soldiers liked. That was it. So I don't know. It's hard for me to say I worked as a team. Probably was, but. It's hard for me to come back and try and give some idea and give specific. Probably if I sat down and I thought about it now, because that one I learned to with my Zulu background and playing with Pikinensel on the farm and then learning Shona sitting on top of the hill talking to the guys. Your thinking changes, I think. Whereas a guy who comes out of Joburg or wherever it is, and he sees a black oak, and maybe he does think that there's issues and that he's not going to handle. I never had an incident where a guy would refuse to climb onto a truck because there's some black guys on the truck type thing, or he would refuse to use the toilets because some black guys use the toilet, or whatever, or eat the same food that the black guys would. Or the black guys would refuse to eat the same food that the white. We made food to suit everybody. In 121 battalion and at 116 battalion, the rations, the guys got the rice. They every now and again they got the potatoes and the pap and everything like that, and they ate it. And the national servicemen, corporals and whatever, sat at their tables and ate with the guys and same food. So I know. Troopies always normally sleep in tents and stuff like that in the bush. It's the way it is. Corporals the same. Officers sleep in 16 by 32 cent. Doesn't matter which army you go to. There's different sort of structures. I don't know. I would have to sit and think seriously to identify definite situations. actually a bit difficult to point out circumstances. There obviously were situations. Okay, but one thing I have found that in South Africa, that the guys, we tend to let things go. Okay, whereas if you lie to a Zulu or you cheat to them, bazokumbula, they remember, they don't forget it. That is why between the Xhosas and the Zulus, there's no love lost. They go through the motion, but there's no love lost. Okay, by Kumbula, those days of Chaka, when Chaka used to send the impies down there and take their cattle away. And when their cattle were taken away, then they'd look across the Fish River and the Kai River and see the Boers' cattle and say, we haven't got cattle. And they'd go across and steal there. Then the commandos would get together and go and murakak out of them and take the cattle back. So, you know, and then you've got people who say, oh, you know, this is our land. We were here first. Well, if you go and look at most Xhosa, you will see that they're paler skinned than most of the average black people in South Africa. And their cheekbones are high and their eyes are slanted. What is that? That is the same features as a bushman. So what did they do? They interbred with the Khoisan down here, the bushman, as we want to call. And so who was here first? The Xhosa or the bushman? You see? So I go into this argument. I've been in many arguments with a guy and I said, listen, Lalela, my friend, don't come and tell me about your land. Then you need to give your land back to the Khoisan. Because when the Portuguese missionaries went into Mozambique and they swept and went up into just north of Mutare and places like that into Rhodesia and around, there were no Bantu. There were only Bushmen. And that's in the 15th century. So when people come and tell you, but this is up, yeah, I'll just say to them, yeah, who believes you? You must look within yourself. And then when I start pointing out things to them about the Xhosa and the features different to Zulus and paler feature, the yellower features, the high cheekbones, the slanted eyes, whatever. I see them go, what are we talking about here? Go look. Does the normal Xhosa from down there, you know, down in the south, look like a Zulu? They're white. Or the other word is for yellows and Mpof. Yeah. So, well, there we are. And do you look like a Zimbabwean? Nyama. It's the oil in Zambia, it's black. I say, well, what are you? I'm brown. It's well, there's the difference. You must understand, you know. Except that in Zambia, you find a lot of yellowy colored people as well, with the high cheekbones and the slant eyes. But that's not from the Bushmen. That's from the building of the Tazara line when the Chinese were here. They eventually had to put them into compounds because they were running rampant with their pants around their ankles. And the people were getting cross and wanting to kill them for that. So they had to protect them. But people don't like talking about that, you see.
Actually, I have to say that I think you definitely will have to come back at some stage because there's going to be a lot of questions here. But I want to leave us by asking you, do you have any message for your comrades, for somebody perhaps who's listening here who haven't seen you perhaps in many years or seen you yesterday perhaps?
Hey, there's a lot of guys I'd like to talk to again. Plenty of them. RL guys, RLI guys, some of them that were with me as troopies. I'd like to talk to them. Some of them I lost touch totally with. Some guys I'm still in touch with, guys that I did officers course in the Rhodesian Army, that's in 1974. One of my guys is very sick, a friend is very sick at the moment. He was one of the best stick man on our course. The other guy, which was the best student on the course, he's in Botswana or whatever. I would have seen him a couple of weeks ago, but I didn't go down to a meeting, and I don't know if he went to the meeting. We have a meeting once a year at a place in Kloof, but I didn't go this year. There were certain things that got in my way. But I would, yes, a lot of the guys that I've mentioned names, I'd like to chat to them again. It's just that it's stupid to lose touch with people, and you get things back and talk over things that happened and fun things and stuff like that. Of course, there are some people that if you got the chance, you take out your mind mill and give him one behind the right here. But then that's life. That's what life's about. You have those people that you disliked intensely. I don't hate anybody. You see, if I hate somebody, then I'm forced by circumstances to kill that person. I dislike certain people. And I avoid contact with those people as much as possible. And there are also many of the guys there that have gone all over the world. I've got friends who are in the US. Actually, the guy who's got me into this, Peter Baxter, he is in the US. He was one of my lieutenants in 121 Battalion. He's in the US. I've got other friends of mine who are in Germany. I've got people like you who are in Thailand or have been to Thailand, living in areas like that. One guy lives in Phuket. I've got friends who are in Australia. I've got a couple of friends, or one friend in particular, who is an Australian, but he refuses to go back there. He's a bunch of wankers. He don't want to go back that side, He's a nice guy. Every now and again, he phones me and we have a short chat, and I phone him and have a chat with him. But there are good guys out there that I really would like to talk to. There are some guys that we could maybe sort out some issues that we left with before, but life is like that. But yes, there's a lot I would like the guys to contact me. I don't know how to, at this stage, get onto answering messages on this. So I'm going to have to wait for my son to come back here in the weekend, and then I'm going to get him how to show me, because with Tony, there was some stuff that I need to answer some questions. Like one guy asked me, when did I start in the Rhodesian Army? When did I retire? And that was 12th of April, 1973, retired 30th of March, 1980, those type of things. And I don't know how to answer the guy. And then guys are saying to me, if you write a book, I want to add some stuff for you. I've got a couple of poems, and I got this and that and that. Yeah, and my issue is that I'm trying to record all the stuff, but the problem is that I'm not really keen about writing my history. I'm really more keen in passing on a message. Lessons learned is more important to me. You can help maybe the future in getting a bit of unity and getting rid of this dysfunctional thing. Because when people talk about racism, they seem to think only whites are racist. Be surprised. Know about the politics in this country, boy. Let me tell you, BEE is the biggest racist thing that's ever hit this country, and that's part of the issue, that we've got to try and sort out these things. These guys have got to get their minds in the right order. Are we going to go forward, or are we going to go into the brave new world? By Aldous Huxley. You see, that's the issue. And I'm sad I'm at that age now that I believe that before I die, there is going to be a reaction to what is being orchestrated now. And soos Nostradamus het geskryf, 27 years of war. We thought that the First World War was heavy. We thought the Second World War was heavy. This ain't nothing. These days are going to be nothing in comparison to this. Nothing. And it's coming. And I wish I was older. I mean, I'm younger, so I could go out there. But get me to run a 2,4 and something like that, that's another story. You know, I can still, I try and do 10 kilometers a day walking, but it's not always possible. You see, I've lost half my day sitting here talking.
That's a very good one, but at least you have something which many people don't have, and that's wisdom and experience. And, you know, part of a legacy thing here is we try to educate. I know there's a whole bunch of young officers watching here, and they do it with respect because they contact me and they say to me they try to learn from the Madalas and from the older officers. And I think they do learn a lot. And I want to say to all of you people here listening here, contact me. Come and talk to me. Don't be afraid. Don't sit in your house and get angry with whatever you're angry about. Come and tell your story to us. You will be surprised how much hours fly. I think we've been talking 3 hours now. For me, it felt like 2 minutes, to be honest. And I'm quite sure we're going to bring the Colonel back again. So if you have any questions, just leave them below. And I'm sure by that time we will know how to answer you. Or we'll make another session and we'll read the question and the man can answer. Because this is fascinating. This is really, to me, one of the great episodes. Because we're getting answers from Ipartse back. And that is important to me because there are lots of people who have certain feelings about what happened to the Rhodesians. I recall we called them the Winwies. I apologize for that. There were quite a few of them in the Ciskei where I was growing up. And they were good people. These were just genuinely good people and they were highly experienced. I don't think they were used correctly. Just my feeling. Yes, there were some people who bullshitted. Not all of them. Not all of them.
The problem is that a lot of people are classed on those that one person has to lie. Or I'll give you an example. You see a policeman walking down the road and he's drunk. And they say, look at the SAP. Look at the police now. Look at it. And every policeman is now painted with that brush for one man that walks down the road drunk. That's not how it should work. But unfortunately, that's how people perceive things. And that has to be changed, you know. You have to evaluate on the situation there. Or go up and sort out the situation there and then with that person. You know, the brave issue is facing it there and then and handling it. You know, I've got it's one of the things that really gets my goat is that when you stand up and you address the problem there and then, and a lot of people don't like that. They want you to go into political speak, which is you tell them a whole lot of nothing to just keep them entertained. And, you know, we have issues around here. We've got all these, and I use the word, and I don't use it as a derogatory term, but people, they call them bunny huggers, okay, environmentalists. And now we've got people who are putting a court action or whatever to stop, I think, I don't know who it is trying to locate oil off our coast. Right. We're paying $25 a liter of fuel. Now at this stage, Namibia has found oil off their coast and gas off their coast. Zimbabwe is drilling for oil. Okay, when they find it, which they will, okay, we're going to be paying them instead of having our own here. And electric vehicles and all the rest of it. You know, and when I start talking about it, you say, oh, one of these kind of people. You know, like a specific situation is that people who talk about trophy hunting. Now, in the 50s, Africa had a serious problem with the game population, was declining at a fast rate. And then certain people decide they're going to go into game farming. And now we have got an abundance of game. Yes, we still have poaching and stuff like that, rhino horn and lion bones and ivory. Yes, we do have. Yeah, but the reason why we have it is because the response to those crimes is not serious enough. The only way you can stop people doing things is that they must fear the consequences of being caught or doing something like that. You can go and put your handbag on top of your car in Dubai and come back and walk after war shopping for 4 or 5 hours, come back and your handbag is still on top of it. Why? Because if you steal a handbag and you get caught, they cut your hand off. Here, what you get a slap on the wrist, and anyway, you live in a squatter camp. So now you get put into Westville hospital. I was going to say hotel. I was being sarcastic. The prison in Westville. There, you get 3 meals a day. You got a roof over your head. You got a blanket on your bed. You got a mattress on your bed, and you got a toilet, and you can watch TV. And sex is for free as well. And drugs are also there. So what is the difference? You come from a squatter camp into a Majondoro, and you're now put into prison, where you're battling to get food in your Majondoro and live comfortably, and now you're living in comfort for hijacking a vehicle or raping a woman or whatever. So you shoot an elephant for the tusk, slag you. But people say, that is too harsh. That's not the way. We're not barbarians anymore. Well, how are you going to stop it? People only realize the consequences. They will only stop carrying out crimes if they realize the consequences and they physically see the consequences of carrying out those crimes. It's the only way you can stop it. And the consequences or the reaction or the punishment must be harsh. So he realizes. That's it. You kill a person, you get killed. Botswana, we had some white woman who killed her boyfriend or husband or whatever there, and the South African government, and now she was sentenced to death. South African government said, okay, well, we'll negotiate. She can spend her time. When they woke up, she was hung already. Nobody in Botswana commits crimes. That's it. I'm talking about serious crimes like that. That's the difference. We problem, when I sat in military law course and all the rest of it, and we talk about dollars, directus, indirectus, eventualis, and all the rest of it. And I sit there and I'm, well, but, you commit a crime. There's only one thing that stops you from committing the crime. Not committing the crime. It's the punishment you're going to get. That's what it's about. Anyway, talking diverts a little bit away from it. But I have many arguments in this area with people. But I'm working on a project at the moment in the townships where I'm teaching people, trying to teach people. They set up a committee, no political affiliation, and they're old, respected people. And they do this exercise where they will sort out the crime in their township. Now, if they sort out the crime in their township, that sorts out the crime in other places, because they commit the crime in other places and bring the stolen goodies back there. We have even in one place here, a house that's called Pick and Pay. Everything that's stolen is taken there, and then you can come and pick and pay. That's the kind of stuff. There's no consequences for your action, and that includes war crimes and contraventions of the Geneva Convention and whatever. Nothing. You've got guys like, what was his name, Milosevic or whatever, and when he committed all those crimes in Serbia and Croatia, and they should have just taken him around the corner and given him one behind the left ear. Boom, done. That's it. The next person say, whoa, if I do that and I get caught, whoa, no more. Anyway, it's easy to talk about it, but it's to get people. We've got we think we're changing, but when it comes to the harsh times, we will have to revert back to those things that work. These other ideologies do not work. The soft touch does not work. And also respect. There's no respect for people, but that's the way it goes. It includes in military discipline. Hard training, respect, and trust. It's not there anymore, but it can be brought back. And as I said, there will be a time where there will be a reaction to what's happening now.
I have no doubts. I have no doubts that a large part of what we're seeing today is planned. and they don't really want to stop these negative things to get a damn reaction out of it. It's called an Hegelian dialectic. But I don't want to talk about that right now.
Yeah.
But we can talk about that in the future. And once again, if you people don't know what I was just saying to you, go and research the Hegelian dialectic or read the GMJ books, which will definitely tell you what I'm talking about and why it is affecting your life. These people are playing games with your life and of your children, of your grandchildren, and there's a lot of people going to die because of it. But we'll talk about that later. For now, I have to say goodbye to all of you. And as we do here at Legacy, until we meet again, God bless and be safe.
Thank you. And you too as well. And may you enjoy the festive season as it comes to us.